Welcome to Plato's Cave. I'm Jordan Myers, and I'm a master's student in philosophy at the University of Houston. You're listening to a reading group episode of the show, which means that in this episode I discuss political philosophy with two non-philosopher friends, Adam and Giffin, because philosophy shouldn't just be for philosophers. So, with that introduction, please enjoy our discussion of political philosophy. Oh, you know what I wanted to ask before we start? Because I thought it'd be interesting, and I forgot to ask this at the beginning of the previous episode, but since we're doing a series on political theory, I don't know, I thought it'd be kind of interesting just to really, really briefly say why we're interested in that. Because it's something that political theory I've only tangentially explored, in undergrad stuff. There have been readings on it in the context of other classes, or the Colorado seminar I did this summer, there were readings that touched on political topics and everything. But so that's and obviously another interest of mine is all of the connections it has to moral responsibility, like we've been talking about. But I mean, because Giffin, you were the most enthusiastic about this series in particular, so maybe we say something about why.
I'd say I was interested in political philosophy because it informs how you view the world and the institutions we have in our society, and thus can allow you to better identify what aspects and how certain aspects are failing us, basically.
Mm-hmm. It's also the most practically applicable area of philosophy, maybe. I mean, besides interpersonal stuff.
Yeah, it is. I mean, this is civilization level. Theory. It will have impact.
And for me, it's kind of two-pronged in a sense, where I want to kind of grapple with the feasibility of some of the political theory, and also study the kind of underlying ethics that kind of undergird different political theories. So, because I think once I figure out exactly which values undergird certain political theories, then I'll be able to better align my own views with those. Because I at this
That's
point,
a good point.
Because I'm pretty sure I know where which values I hold as paramount at this point. So it would be good to find which political theory aligns best with those values, but also seems most feasible in practice.
Yeah,
so that's probably.
That's even more broadly, you can just kind of explore all the assumptions, not even just the moral ones that undergird different political philosophies, because those things are malleable over large stretches of time.
What
was true for the Romans may not be true for us. That can inform your views.
It's actually an interesting way in which amoral values can become moral, right? Efficiency isn't intrinsically a moral value, but in the context of competing political theories, it could actually become a moral value, which is kind of interesting. You know what I mean? And I hadn't thought about this before we started, but I think maybe I have the most disdain for actual politics, at least discussing them, because everything comes down to what's 51% of the population going to vote for, and how do we actually implement this and stuff. And I kind of hate a lot of discussions because of all of those nitty-gritty concerns, but this is a nice area where you can obviously import those concerns, but they're not the entire conversation also. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and even in the paper we're about to discuss here, I mean, there are pronouncements made by the author about how society should function, but there were kind of points where I'm exactly how does the author see that obtaining, right? So, but then they actually, she throws in a line here or there where you're oh, okay, I actually see how that could work. So that's kind of where I'm interested in the feasibility of it, where it's here's the idea, and without going into immense detail, it's okay, I could see why that specific idea would work. Yeah.
So, okay, so let's get into it. So the paper, the lengthy paper that we're talking about is What is the Point of Equality by Elizabeth Anderson. And this was published in 1999 in Ethics, which is obviously was and still is the top moral and political philosophy journal. So this was this was a banger of a paper in to not mince words, but also blanket apology because Adam, you are coming off of COVID, and I am on the upswing of COVID. So, Giffin,
No excuse for me.
assuming you don't have COVID, we have no excuse, or you have no excuse for the brain fog that Adam and I have. So, I'll do some heavy editing on this episode and try to make us sound reasonable. But but yeah, also the problem with that is that this paper is what, it's some 50
It's
odd
50
pages.
Yeah, it's bulky.
So, which is going to add like an additional spin to trying to actually discuss a paper that is that long. So, okay, I thought maybe the reasonable way to do it was maybe say how I understood the overall structure of the paper, and then she does give at the end of page 288 into 289, she does give a lot of really good kind of ground laying, I think, of what she's going to do. And then honestly, after that, I mean, it's a long paper. We can't move through it systematically. So
Yeah.
do you guys think that's reasonable?
Yeah, I can
Okay.
start if you prefer. I have a decent way to begin, I think.
Okay, yeah, do it then.
Yeah, so basically the paper is structured as two halves, and the page count roughly agrees with that as well. The first half is she critiques luck egalitarianism, and then the second half she proposes democratic equality, based on her critique of luck egalitarianism informs like the structure of democratic equality. So in the first pages, she mentions 4 main luck egalitarians that she will critique. Ronald Dworkin, Philip Van Parijs, Richard Arneson, and G.A. Cohen are all, I think those are the main 4 that she will critique over the paper. So with that in mind, she basically says that all of these authors and luck egalitarians broadly are kind of missing the point of what egalitarianism is supposed to be about. And we can kind of define luck egalitarianism shortly, but really what she's saying is the point of equality, in egalitarianism, is to end oppression. And she observes that oppression is a social construct. So that's kind of the main key here. Now, I don't know how much time we really want to spend on luck egalitarianism. We can kind of pick out our favorite examples of just odd claims from those 4 main authors that she critiques, or whatever you prefer. But her main point is, again, the point of equality is to end oppression, which is a social construct. And so her version of egalitarianism is informed by that. That's the goal of it.
Maybe we can do the thing where we say generally what our thoughts are about the paper, because I don't know if this is me or the COVID talking, but I genuinely don't know wholly what I think about this paper. Overall, it has sort of a dimly positive direction, but I kind of want to explore a lot of the ways in which she argues for her conclusions, because I don't even necessarily know that I disagree with her conclusions as much as the way she argues for them. But I don't know how much that's me talking or not.
And even then, what exactly do you mean? Because do you agree with her conclusions with regard to her critiques of luck egalitarianism, or do you agree with her conclusions when it comes to
the positive
equality?
Exactly.
Equality as a capability approach instead of the I think what I disagree with more, it seems, and again, this could change by the end of the episode because I read this a week ago and then COVID or whatever, right? So currently my dim understanding is that I think I agree a lot with where she ends up, but I'm not sure that her critiques of luck egalitarianism, A, are always valid, but B, always kind of result in the positive proposal she puts forth. I don't know. These just kind of things like I'm trying to flag and table for us to like keep in mind for my own edification.
That's good.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I agree with half of that, to the point where I don't think that her critiques in all cases necessarily prescribe her sort of perspective, right? But also, I actually, in fact, agree with the critiques themselves of lucky egalitarianism. Like, I pretty much agreed with all of them. I think, going off what Giffin was saying, I think there were largely critiques of the paternalism and pity.
That was my biggest one I wanted to look at.
Yeah, and kind of pity-based justification for redistribution. And I found those to be kind of lacking as well. Like, I agreed with her that I didn't think those were good justifications. And I think that really was much of the foundation for lucky egalitarianism. So I kind of agree with that critique. So
you know what I thought was actually very serendipitous with this paper coming off of the moral responsibility stuff is you could largely view a lot of this debate as a very analogous conversation between different kinds of incompatibilists and compatibilists about moral responsibility, right? Like there's a way in which the luck egalitarians can split into kind of two groups almost. There's like the Galen Strawson ones, and then there's the more optimistic ones like early Summers or like Dirk Paraboom, and then there's what she kind of comes out of the wash as, where because we'll get to this, but I read her prescription as not focusing so much on sort of luck in the sense that like you would focus on deterministic details, but more about compatibilist capabilities of people. So not all of her conclusions would be satisfying to someone who's focused on luck and determinism and chance. Like her solutions wouldn't be as satisfying to like a Sam Harris free will denier, but they would be more amenable to like a compatibilist, like a John Martin Fisher, Harry Frankfurt, Gary Watson, something like that. So I actually think the analogies are pretty cool between this and the last series.
Definitely, and I'm sure, I don't know if you guys had the same instinct. Obviously it's in a different context, so you can't do this, but I definitely had like the slight instinct to deny or reject the dichotomy of optional and brute luck. You know what I mean? Whatever,
of course, just like, there's margins are filled with that.
Yeah, because it was like whenever that came up, I'm like, what's the difference actually? So,
yeah.
So in the context of our previous discussions, so.
I agree. Yeah, there's too many margins, but there's got to be somewhere where it's just it's all brute luck. Somewhere I have that written down.
I like the fact that she kind of was like, it doesn't really matter either, because the luck part shouldn't be the focus.
Yes.
So she's like, even if there will continue to be a conversation about like that difference, it's tangential to equality because it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I agree.
Which is good, because I can only assume that in like the 90s, like lucky egalitarianism, it was just a big conversation surrounding this, given on how popular this paper was. So it's good for her to just kind of like say, all right, like we need to go in this direction. Like enough of that aspect. Like a decade of papers on brute versus option luck is can be a little bit mind numbing.
So there's two synonyms for the same view that she's critiquing, right? There's equality of fortune,
yes,
and then there's luck egalitarianism, and those are the same view, but they go under different names.
Yeah, I'm guessing that like the literature,
I like the latter,
has two. Luck egalitarianism I think is my preference, but basically the rough definition is basically whether the point of equality is to compensate people for undeserved bad luck, right? Whatever that may be.
Misfortune is the term she uses a lot.
Right. Yes. Should you be compensated for misfortune? And is that the goal of equality?
Yeah.
And she basically says, no, this is not really the conversation we should be having. It's about oppression, a social construct.
Yeah.
And we should also be careful. Like we don't actually know for sure that they're the same. Because the thing is,
they're at least close enough.
They're definitely close enough, but at the same time, like there were distinctions made about the different scholars that she's critiquing,
of course,
where I'm not exactly sure whether they would all describe themselves as luck egalitarians or kind of equality of fortune. Or
Those
whatever it is.
terms were probably made by these authors to distinguish within the realm
That's
of
true,
what Anderson
yeah.
calls luck egalitarianism, right? But she's
That's
like,
true.
they're the same with respect to equality because they're wrong. So that is a good point, though. Like, if you just kind of fall within luck egalitarianism, you might be a little upset if kind of just saying one or the other.
We
Yeah.
might sound as ignorant as someone criticizing just compatibilism generally, as though there weren't different types within there.
Yeah,
So
I just wanna be
blanket
careful
apology
about
for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's a really good point. She does say explicitly, this is on page 290, that luck egalitarianism, I thought this was very clear.
Mhm.
Luck egalitarianism relies on two moral premises: that people should be compensated for undeserved misfortunes, and that the compensation should come only from that part of others' good fortune that is undeserved. So the point that she's like really, really making stark there is that luck egalitarianism, as she portrays it, again, because we're grossly unfamiliar with the literature, but she's laying it out that it only has one lens through which to view everything, and that's luck, right? So we should take her basic idea, and I don't think she's obviously not saying that this group is advocating for equity, that is like equality of outcome, but they're advocating that the parts of people's outcomes that are based on good fortune should be taken in part, or probably for some of these people in whole, I don't know, and redistributed to people who suffer from bad luck, right? And that is something that she criticizes, and she has this whole, I mean, are we ready to get to that section where she lays out all of the issues with it? Because I thought that would be interesting to go through.
Sure.
Okay, so you know what, if you would, let's actually, we need to explain the differences, because she separates them, because she criticizes luck egalitarianism in two different kind of pillars, or two different ways, because there's two facets of it. There's option luck and fortune luck, or brute luck. So where do you guys have a highlight of a definition that she gives
Of which one?
of both? I'm just kind of trying to get them on the table.
It's on page 291.
Oh, nice. Okay, I was on 295.
I believe.
291. There's I'm going to be editing out a whole lot of page finding, I'm sure, but that's fun.
Of course. Yeah, so I can just read from here. Basically, she says, like, all luck egalitarians place great stress on the distinction between the outcomes for which an individual is responsible, that is, those that result from her voluntary choices, and the outcomes for which she is not responsible, good or bad outcomes that occur independent of her choice, or of what she could have reasonably foreseen. And of course, that's the difference between option luck and brute luck. And there was some interesting, like, kind of more economically oriented points about the conversion, or the capacity to convert between, brute and option luck, which I found interesting. But it's not really where the paper hinges on.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to make a note of that just briefly, that it is interesting. It's given me a vocabulary within economics is really my point there. But yeah, that is the difference between the two, in her words.
The way I was kind of reading that, going back to the analogy about free will and moral responsibility, is the analogy there is option luck are sort of the things that are within your local control, and then brute luck are the things that aren't even in your local control, even though, of course, for like listeners who are familiar with the previous episodes, local control will collapse into absolute determinism plus randomness.
We can give some examples. I think the one that she gives is basically, if you have the option to like purchase insurance for something, and you have that just choice in front of you, you can choose yes or no, and there will be a luck component to that outcome, but you have the choice, which would make it option luck. Exactly. Brute luck is something seemingly like, I was born without a left foot,
or like a genetic predisposition to cancer or something.
Oh yeah.
It wasn't brought on by
it didn't be
smoking.
Congenital, right?
Yeah.
So those are the kind of distinctions that she makes, or that the luck egalitarians seem to have made, between themselves, and which,
okay. This is one of my first questions. What role is that distinction? So one thing that I understood very well from her exposition of the luck egalitarians is the role that distinction plays for them, right?
Yeah.
So one question that I was kind of concerned about is I'm not sure that I understand what role that distinction plays in for her. Because I should like motivate that question a little bit more, I guess. Okay, so I take it that the luck egalitarians have that distinction as a resource in bracketing types of redistribution that we should be in favor of, right? So you can say they're like, I'm assuming we all get the intuition that, like, let's just start with the easiest cases. Brute luck is something that extremely sucks, right? And it should be sort of extremely counteracted because it sucks so badly, right? So people who are sort of born, I don't know,
no legs.
Yeah, like no legs or something, right? Like that sucks way worse than some bad outcome of option luck for most cases.
So, well, I mean, I think
it's not that
I think it's better to kind of view it through the luck egalitarian framework, right? Because I don't want to say one's, you know, better or worse, but
you're right.
From their perspective, and this is like Dworkin's perspective, right? The government functions as an insurance, pretty much. So, and in his framework, if people were to take out insurance for types of congenital kind of abnormalities, then, you know, the government is pretty much the
government is the insurer against.
Yeah, so it kind of like it will. The word's not appearing to me here, but sort of like
would you take out insurance against COVID brain fog if you could?
Alice says no and suffers the consequences.
Giffin suddenly converts to brute egalitarian.
Yeah, I can make some comments on my thoughts on the egalitarian view or the luck egalitarian view.
There you go ahead. I can't even think of the exact word that I want to say.
If you think of it, bring it up. It might be in the paper as well. But basically what I gather is, again, there's a spectrum within luck egalitarianism, but basically the distinction for them is, you know, the distinction between option and brute luck is that, you know, it helps you identify the claimants of redistribution, right? You know, and also the magnitude, right? Because they describe like this component should be taken from those who are lucky in order to compensate those who are not lucky. And whether or not you were lucky in the right way. So that's kind of like the point of that distinction. Again, there's a spectrum within there about like the claimant and the recipient, or the claimant of the redistribution and like those who are being, you know, taken from. Basically, all I said was Anderson doesn't really think it's relevant, but it may, you know, maybe it plays some role in a kind of subordinate way. You know, like it may be useful in some aspect, but it's not the goal. And it's not going to be, and importantly, it's not going to determine claimants in her eyes, at least.
Yes.
In an ideal sense, at least.
I have a question.
Right. And the main, of course.
Okay, because what you just said is perfect tabling for it. And some of this is hard to answer before we actually get to her work, but let's not be like too worried about that. Okay.
Of course.
One thing that I thought that luck egalitarianism conserved nicely, and I don't know how her view conserves this, is, the distinction between option luck and brute luck, to me, kind of looks like, I'm sorry to keep using the analogy, but like distinctions that incompatibilists can make based on consequentialist concerns, right? So if you think about it, everything is brute luck all the way down. Like no one chose all of the predispositions that they have, but we live in a world in which you get to exercise option luck, right? Or choices which lead to option luck or not, right? So it seems really, really, I get pulled by the intuition that it actually in a deep sense does make a lot of sense for us to try to cancel out the obscene differences in brute luck while still kind of maintaining the ability for people to win or lose, for lack of better terms, in terms of option luck, which they get to enact, right? This is almost like, I'm almost kind of channeling like social democracy, right? Where we sort of want that mix between the best of capitalism and the best of socialist ideas, right? So like, I understand and agree with how a luck egalitarian could conserve that distinction. But if you're trying to cancel out sort of social, if you're trying to cancel out social oppression and allow people to exert or kind of express their capabilities, maybe I'm actually discovering that you need to conserve both of these, and I'm wondering if that's why I found the paper slightly unconvincing in both directions. Like, so I get the shortcomings.
You basically think that it should be important, the distinction there in terms of policy, it sounds like.
I do, because theoretically, obviously, there's no deep distinction metaphysically.
Of course. Yeah,
sure.
I don't think Anderson has a problem with that claim, and I don't think we do. So
that would have been fun if there was like a second contrasting view, like whatever the libertarian in the free will sense would have been for the like. I guess they would just be actually libertarians would probably be libertarians.
It's all too natural.
that would, you know, like it's like it's all
you
the
market sin
like,
in your past lives.
Yeah, like
deserve that, you know, congenital disease.
And I also guess it depends like what you mean by conserve some elements of like option luck. Like what if someone like, you know, doesn't pick up health insurance, right? Like under our current system, like
I don't want to be saying that everything boils down to both. Like I think that that's where her critique of luck egalitarianism was accurate. But it seems to me that there are also really true distinctions. Like I'm not saying,
well, that's why it's not in every area. That's why she says like to be kind of like an equal citizen. We're not trying to kind of equalize every aspect, right?
Yeah, I don't know that was necessarily.
So I don't know if this is
but actually, well, let me make this last point. I think she's just trying to say that some things are outside the purview of the dichotomy of option and brute luck, right? Like some things can't even be looked at through that lens.
Yeah.
Where it's whether you kind of arrived at this poor position through brute luck or option luck, we're going to treat you the same. So
yeah. So Jordan, I don't know if this is from later in the paper, but I don't know if this kind of was an example that kind of highlighted your reaction, but she mentions the example of like the flooding insurance. Because people have some degree of choice as to where they, you know, dwell. If you live like on the coast in a hurricane prone area, the likelihood is clearly higher, and you know that in advance. You can assume that adults at least are aware. So that would be an example of optional luck, which some luck egalitarians would say like, well, they did have the choice. It was optional luck, not brute luck, and therefore like
it was like
help should be like
she chose like this particularly heinous what was that person, Radagowski or something, Rakowski? Rakowski.
Where is this?
Well, just throughout the paper, remember she contrasted her view to Rakowski, and Rakowski was like, he or she, I don't remember, was particularly brutal. Like,
oh no, she actually says like this may seem brutal. I think at one point to
I was like, is this really? Here I will say this. I did think that there was a bit of straw manning, or at least attacking the lowest common denominator by her. I mean, there were pages upon like of combating Rakowski's view, and I was like, well, yeah, but Rakowski's view is monstrous.
I had the reaction too, and that's where I said this in the group chat, is that it started to scream 1999 to me because of the context in which this was being written. Okay. So post-Soviet collapse was just the capitalist glory age, because there was no competition to the model. So this is of course where like views like Rakowski's would have like gotten like legitimate, you know, viewership, right? So like it's unfortunate if it was like 2 years later after the .com like crash, or like after especially like the Great Recession, this wouldn't have, like, she wouldn't have needed to address it because it would have seemed monstrous. The fact that it was like the time needed to be dedicated it, I don't think it's a slight against Anderson. I think it's a slight against the circumstances.
I just thought that it was like
what a monstrous view.
It was like okay, not many readers will read Rakowski and be sympathetic to that view.
Again, I think actually a lot of people were at the time though. That's the horrifying thing.
Sure, but I'm talking about within the reasonable area of the spectrum. Like
here's one of his better takes here. So consider an uninsured driver who negligently makes an illegal turn that causes an accident with another car. Witnesses call the police reporting who is at fault. The police transmit this information to emergency medical technicians. When they arrive at the scene and find the driver is at fault, is uninsured, they leave him to die by the side of the road. According to Rakowski's doctrine, this action is just, for they have no obligation to give him emergency care. No doubt, there are sound policy reasons for not making snap judgments on a personal responsibility at the scene of emergency. But
what did she call that problem?
She like was like it was like the snap decision problem or something. It was like
I do like that abandonment of negligent victims.
Yeah, I mean that's just a good example. Like I don't know how Rakowski sleeps at night.
I was like, so I just thought absurd. I thought, okay, it's not exactly the most prideful way to put forth your argument to contrast it to something so poor as Rakowski's, right? So like I take it, so I take it that because like Rakowski, as I was reading him or her through Anderson, is like essentially that, you know, that kind of bastard, for lack of a better word, who's saying like, well, yeah, you're dealt the cards, but it's all how you play them, as they like sit in their mansion. Yeah, it's like
unable to move.
It's like, okay, yeah, okay, but your ability to play the cards you're dealt is also a card. Like, those people seem to always forget that, right?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, I take it that the luck egalitarian of a reasonable type has opened to them the motivation that I was kind of poorly phrasing earlier, where you can be motivated to, it's sort of like brute luck is the thing that's the most egregious, right? We want to eliminate bad brute luck. Mm-hmm. That's our top priority. But a second priority that we could have is also eliminating bad option luck that is kind of maladaptive to society or something, right? So like what's a good example? Like we okay, here's like a good example, right? Mm-hmm. It's a bad option luck to get caught up in a Ponzi scheme, or to make it a real world example, packaging bad housing loans, right? Like it was in the 2008 crash, you know what I mean? It's bad option luck to kind of end up at whatever the firms where the names are escaping me, right? Mm-hmm. So but that person should starve on the street also, right? So it's like, I just thought she strawmanned what the best of the luck egalitarians could do. We're saying like, look, all we're using this distinction for is to prioritize levels of luck that we want to eliminate, right? Like the first
I just wouldn't go that far. I mean, like, she explicitly states like, okay, here's one end of the spectrum. This is the hard line Rakowski, right? And then I honestly thought she kind of grappled with Dworkin the most, who's like, mm-hmm. I mean, he's NYU professor of law and philosophy. So it's like
very reasonable position.
Yeah. So big voice, right, in the field. So Rakowski, I feel like, was more like a benchmark. Like, okay, here's one extreme, and here are other views people.
Well, sanity check for me. Did she address that concern at all that I made? Did I miss that in the paper? Like, I genuinely could have missed it.
I think it's kind of like a broad stroke kind of thing. Is that it's not that she doesn't think that luck egalitarians can address those like differences. It's that she doesn't think that's the point of egalitarianism. Yeah. I think within her system, there is a place for such a difference. Mm-hmm. Perhaps, I don't know that for sure. Especially when it comes to practical policy. When it comes to practical policy things, which she touches on the least. Yeah. Like in reality, not under like ideal situations. Mm-hmm. I'm sure that there is a place for something like that.
Yeah.
When you're constrained.
And you're right that the paper is trying to answer the question of the title, which is, what is the point of equality? So exactly. She's trying to ground it. She's looking at the grounding first.
Yeah, I don't think she's saying, like, I mean, she doesn't like spend any time talking about like the benefits really of like egalitarianism.
Yeah.
I'm sure she would agree there are some, but she says like I've
Mhm.
identified these problems from this, you know, decent spectrum of luck egalitarians, and these problems I've identified
Yeah.
suggest some desires of a egalitarian theory.
Hmm.
I'm going to use that information and then construct one. So I think I don't know what you would actually say to like what is the role of brute and optional luck in your like democratic equality. She may say like it's like a tertiary, you know, quaternary thing that only kind of comes into play whenever you're in the real world and like have to make decisions. Like you don't have like the full resources. You have to prioritize, find a hierarchy of, you know, distribution, things like that. Like that's where she would nest it if she does value it, I would guess.
Okay, that's interesting. I'm realizing it's probably better listening if we actually get her problems with luck egalitarianism on the table and raise hers, and then we can kind of get a little bit more into like, I guess, a lot of the questions I seem to have.
Sure.
Okay.
One of the problem is that she identifies like so many problems over so many pages, like
It's a
individually
lot,
for like
yeah.
egalitarianism. I'm guessing.
Let's
from the
point
way
out
you
the
say
good
that.
ones here.
I was gonna say I can take care of all the editing. Let's look at some of the best ones, because I thought a lot of these were actually really good. Because there's
you pick out your favorite, really.
well, I'm just reading. There's discrimination among the disabled, but I don't remember that one. We can
No, that one's not great.
okay. Well, there's the one that Giffin already talked about, the geographical discrimination among citizens. So
That one's
essentially,
good.
that is a good one, and Giffin already said that. That was if you foolishly, you know, move to New Orleans and then don't prepare for the flooding that's going to occur. That's
The
poor
government's just
option
gonna
luck.
walk by and go option luck, and let you drown.
Well, Rakowski's government would.
Right.
I don't think. Yeah, I don't think it's fair to say the
Of
luck
course,
egalitarian.
of course.
Yeah,
Rakowski's government. Imagine.
What a snake! Pure oppression.
I don't know. I just really thought like how, you know, Rakowski's view has got to be popular amongst the coldest hearts out there. I mean, like
Nothing but the deepest, darkest conservatives would
Yeah.
agree.
Oh, I appreciated the problem of vulnerability of dependent caretakers.
oh, I liked that one too.
That one's actually
yeah.
critical because
Yeah.
that one directly informs.
And that was her
her
best point. I
democratic
thought.
equality.
Yeah,
What page is that? Do you have that?
It's
298. Yeah, but it spills out of 297.
Do you want to go over that briefly?
Yeah.
Well, okay, I'll just read a little bit from her. She says children are not responsible either for their parents' luck of wealth or for their parents' decision to reproduce. Thus, it is a matter of bad brute luck requiring compensation if their parents lack the means to give them their fair share. But the women who devote themselves to caring for children are another story, since women are not on average less talented than men, but choose to develop and exercise talents that command little or no market wage. It is not clear whether luck egalitarians have any basis for remedying the injustices that attend their dependence on male wage earners. Call this the problem of vulnerability of the dependent caretakers, which is an excellent problem.
Yeah, this is where her kind of feminine ethics comes into play. I know that is one of the fields which she specializes in, but
Yeah.
this one touches on it only kind of briefly.
Which is a good one, actually. Like, it's not one
That's
that
a
I would
great-
think of. Yeah.
It's a great point.
Yeah.
I mean, just very close to another point that she makes about like the distinction between like the economy and those who are engaged in market like activity,
yes.
which is another good one. But I think that's more
And
in the
that-
positive claim section.
And that comes out in her exercising of capabilities as the main view through which to view these things, not because she does. We haven't really talked about this, but she accuses the luck egalitarians of only being able to view things in terms of luck as the inputs, but then the outputs as monetary, narrowly but larger sort of material, gains or losses and resources.
And I don't know that all the luck egalitarians were like that, but she did
Yeah.
seem to think that it was like a main through point.
And can I say, so that my question that we will circle back to, because again, I don't want to discuss it now, but it arose from kind of sentences like she said, it is not clear whether luck egalitarians have any basis for remedying the injustices that attend these issues, right? That was what I was saying before with like, I kind of think that this is like a view of the worst luck egalitarians, because I think there's this really straightforward way in which you could be a luck egalitarian, but through just like really kind of basic consequentialist concerns, it would be pretty obvious to see why, even from a luck egalitarian perspective, we should compensate, the vulnerability of dependent caretakers. But I mean, we can circle back to that. But I was going to say, like, sentences like that are why
Well,
I thought
the vulnerability, I think the point she was making is that maybe not all, but some lucky egalitarians would identify, like, you made the choice to be a dependent caretaker. And that,
Rakowski.
no, I mean, that might even be more than just Rakowski. That might be like
sure,
Hornus or something.
A lot
Or
of people,
Van Pere.
like a lot of people would say that.
Yeah, no, like legitimately, that's the problem she
a
identifies
lot
there.
of
Is
common
like they
folk
made
would
the
say that.
choice to do this, put themselves in a vulnerable position for their entire lives. Therefore, they are not a claimant of distribution. So, is some version of lucky egalitarianism able to discuss that? Perhaps, but I mean, you really have to strain the idea of brute and option luck to have that framework apply there.
Let's circle back to that.
Yeah.
What were some of the other good ones? Exploitation and the lack of a safety net. I don't remember if that was a good one. Oh no, that was based on Rakowski's view.
Yeah. What did you guys think about the one disparages the internally disadvantaged and raises private disdain to the status of officially recognized truth? Where basically the state is insulting you. This is like 306.
Three. Well, let's say that now we're switching to victims of bad brute luck, because we were talking about.
Oh, I'm sorry. We did change sections there, but we were still within the section of critiquing.
Sure, but I think.
Yeah.
Oh, but wait. Sorry, before we get to that one,
Sure.
One of her biggest and most recurring ones in her own section was the accusation of paternalism, of bad option luck. So. He argues that it's sometimes fair. I don't know if this is relevant or not, but I have it highlighted. Arneson has considered this problem most deeply within the terms of luck egalitarianism. He argues that it is sometimes unfair to hold people responsible for the degree to which they are responsible agents. The capacities needed for responsible choice, foresight, perseverance, calculative ability, strength of will, self-confidence, are partly a function of genetic endowments, and partly of the good fortune of having decent parents. So thus, the imprudent are entitled to paternalistic protection by society against their poor choices. Channel the Sam Harris free will denier here, So she says that is a problem, and she labels that as paternalism, which is sort of, you could summarize it as overprotection and regulation for people's best interests. And she says that the state, I take it that her critique is, it doesn't, and this is where she kind of has the prelude to her view. This is wrong as a policy prescription because it fails to express respect for recipients, right? It's sort of,
it ties back. I'm sorry, Jordan.
No. Yeah.
I was going to, I think I'm on a very slight lag. I was going to say,
really?
this ties back to her view of like the point of equality being, social in nature, is that it is I don't know if she would call it oppression necessarily, but the disrespect that is given is a form of social inequality. And therefore it falls under the purview of what equality, or is a target for, these equality prescriptions. That makes sense.
Yeah. No, it does.
I think it's also just trying to kind of like skew the framing, or like kind of change the framing of how one could argue for equality, right? Because like I like this line. However, in their view, and there in this case is lucky egalitarians, only paternalistic reasons can justify making mandatory the various universal social insurance programs characteristic of modern welfare states, like Social Security, health and disability insurance, and so on. So things like, the argument might have gone before reading this paper, why do we have Social Security? And you're like, well, some, even though it's not a lot of money that people get, after they retire, some people just won't, save for their retirement. So in fact, we do need this, even though you yourself could actually use that money better, right? You could put that money you would otherwise be putting, for social security taxes, you could put that into some sort of growth fund,
A
right?
higher,
and,
return.
and you'd make more money as a result of that.
Yeah.
But we tax you, we tax everyone so that no one is completely broke after retirement, right?
Yeah.
Or during retirement, I suppose.
No one's broke after retirement. We shan't send a beggar to the grave. Yeah.
So it is sort of like paternalistic logic in that sense, where it's like,
yeah, and it's paternalistic to both sides, right? Because it's paternalistic sort of negatively to the people who could do better, and positively, I don't mean in a good sense, but like in the sense of you're too stupid to do it for yourself, so we're going to make you do it to protect yourself.
Exactly. So, and the thing is, and it's not that that logic isn't like necessarily true, right? Because like history bears that out, right? Like didn't elderly poverty drop in half after like social security was passed?
A lot of people are pretty dumb.
Yeah, because people just like wouldn't save on their own throughout their lives. So you could make this argument, but that's not going to be appealing to everyone.
Yeah.
Right. Like someone who's just like, honestly, why take away my money? Like, because the thing is, couldn't Rogan. Well, the thing is,
why are you taking my money?
We know people who are like this. I mean, our one friend from high school is probably like this. Why save, money for anything in the future?
Yeah. And also like, what about like, I think there are like obviously good ways to respond to this, but like, what if someone said, well, couldn't I just invest my money wisely and then, just be a better benefactor in my older age to provide for people who
like that's going to happen.
Yeah. Like I could be a better provider for the issues you're trying to address.
Exactly. Like what if they are that kind of person though? Yeah. You're like, okay, well,
yeah,
you alone can't solve all these issues, right? And they're like, yeah, but maybe people like me would be more willing to solve these issues if you didn't have some sort of system in place that already, have solved these issues. I don't know. I don't know exactly how the conversation would go, but the point is though, like she's trying to change the dialogue a little bit with like the arguments that underlie.
This is something I want to return to because I actually wonder if the very concerns of paternalism reemerge in more covert ways in her prescription.
That would be interesting.
That was one question that I wanted to kind of discuss. But again, like I do think for like listening's sake, I think it's better to actually get some of like her details on the table first.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. Distinguish between okay, let's move on from that. Okay. Any victims of bad brute luck that we wanted to talk about?
I had asked you if you had any interesting thoughts on like the one basically where the state
do I have any interesting thoughts? That might be up to you to determine.
Basically, did you think it was like a viable critique that she was giving, or do you think the issue of like this is actually pretty closely related to the paternalism, but basically here's the quote about she's kind of like saying that this is what in egalitarian's framework the state is saying to those who are benefiting from whatever welfare program. She says, to the disabled, your defective native endowments or current disabilities, alas, make your life less worth living than the lives of normal people. And then she goes on and gives other examples. Did you think that was like a valid critique? Do you think that there's something inherent there? And Jordan, this may be something you bring up later when we get to her positive prescriptions.
Yeah. Wait. So, but I think for the listeners, we should, she's saying that this was on 306?
305 and 306, yeah.
Yeah, I took it that this critique was also kind of the lack of respect or paternalization side, because she called it she says equality of fortune disparages the internally disadvantaged and raises private disdain to the status of officially recognized truth. Okay.
Yeah.
This was one that I thought was kind of like an interesting one, and one you have to be really careful about because you don't, because like there's a concern of you don't want to be like the charged word for it is ableist, right? So you don't want to say like it's objectively. So here's the claim that I don't think that you have to be committed to as a luck egalitarian. You
Sure.
don't have to say the life of someone in a wheelchair is worth less than the life of someone who's not a wheelchair, right? Like that's like the reductio view, like that. Like who knows? Rakowski might believe that.
It is.
Rakowski joins the Zoom call. Post haste. Right. So I don't think you have to say that. But I don't. But okay. But here's the view that I think I would be willing to defend, and I don't know if this makes me a luck egalitarian or not. But I think like if you abstract it, right. Generally speaking, there are more things that someone who has function over their legs can do than someone who doesn't, right? Okay,
Yeah.
so like in what, like that's an obvious claim, right? So no one would really, well, no, I can't phrase it like that. Hold on, I gotta figure out how to phrase it.
You get canceled.
I'm not really concerned. I'm actually just trying to be like specific.
Yeah, of course.
Because there's like a really cheap version of this that I don't want to make, and then there's the deeper version that I think is maybe more accurate. Okay, here's what I want to say. Given the ability, okay, here's what it is. This debate actually came up. This is a real life debate. Remember, there was sort of we developed a scientific ability to not cure deafness, maybe cure deafness. I don't remember, right? But there was a technology and a procedure, I don't know any of the details, where we could essentially make some babies born with certain types of deafness equivalent to people who could hear naturally, right?
Of course.
So I think that it would be heinous not to, let's bracket other concerns. It might be too much money, whatever, right? Like, let's say that procedure is $1. I think that it would be starkly immoral to not pay that $1 to have your deaf baby
as the parent or as the state?
Either.
Okay, that was an important distinction. Yeah.
I was saying almost from like the Rawlsian kind of rational third party view. Like if you're just like the rational third party, it would be like deeply immoral not to do that.
That is interesting, actually. That is one thing that definitely doesn't read as easy, I guess I would say.
Yeah.
In this paper is when she talks about specific communities of well, actually, you're right. You want to be very specific when you.
I know you want to be very specific.
Yeah. But
it's not
certain less abled communities. Even then, that's clearly. How does she describe it? Actually,
also the language of 1999 is different
from
today.
But yeah, either way.
I'm just wondering if that point distinguishes either view, though. I feel like that could be found within her view. It could be found within luck egalitarian.
Well, no, I don't know that she does prescribe that in her view. That's I think what Jordan's trying to get at. Like, I think she would be okay as long as those. Well, in the case of a baby, it's harder to say because they don't have any capacity. But as like an adult,
if some,
as long as the state makes all of these the important or the democratic equality relevant aspects of the being a member of the community accessible to the you, then there's no the further concern directly.
Maybe we should.
I don't know.
I think that's her view.
I do want to push back on that a little bit through her lens of capabilities, right? Where she wants to leave certain avenues open that you don't necessarily have to make functional, right? Or make happen, but at least in the context of babies, right? Where it's if there was some cheap procedure, I would say from her perspective, if it was to be an equal citizen, I would somehow I'd have to imagine that'd be under the umbrella of equal citizenry of that would probably reach that for me.
I don't know that she would agree, but I understand that it totally could for you. I don't think she actually mentions babies at all in any of her thought experiment. That is a super interesting question because Jordan, you brought that up, right?
This one doesn't really exist, what I mean? Because
I would actually. So the fact that I think because it affects development, I'm curious what you would say about this. It's like by not giving it to the child, you kind of remove the option in a way. Like
I don't think that's how she would look at it. Do you think?
I just don't see how she could possibly disagree with that point, because the thing is,
Well,
like,
I don't think that's what Giffin was saying.
Hang on.
Yeah,
Let me
okay.
make this point though. Like, she talks about, like, in this paper, how, let me make sure I give this idea correctly here, but she mentions that the deaf community says that, okay, it's not that we need, for us to hear to, like, live as equal citizens, but it's that to navigate modern society, we would prefer that communication be made as easily as it is among the non-deaf community.
Yeah. She said, imagine what a society would look like if everyone were deaf. And then that's how accessible society should be to the deaf in our current society.
Yes, but it's currently not.
Yes,
that's true.
Yes.
So the idea is that if you're a member of the deaf community right now, you can't act as an equal citizen entirely.
Yeah. And in that way, you can't exercise the full range of your capabilities, which is the basis of her.
Right.
So I'd have to imagine if it was like a child for like a cheap procedure, one way or the other, I have to imagine to, like, leave a child open to the full range of its capabilities.
Yeah.
I feel like you need to give the child the procedure. I don't know.
So the reason why I raised that is because the way I'm looking at this debate, right? She's asking the question, what is the core value at the bottom of equality, right? What, like, that's the title of the paper. What's the point of equality? It's unclear to me, and maybe Giffin, you might know, maybe either of you might know this. Okay, so I think the one thing that's obvious is that she says the kind of capabilities approach or the equal respect approach, I don't know what the term for it is, but that the exercising of capabilities is the core value of hers, right? Does she say, this is something that I just don't know about, and this is like, I don't know how my critique goes, because is she saying that that's the core value, or is she saying that's like the only value? She's not saying it's the only value, right? But I don't know.
I think she would claim, if I'm reading this correctly, the core value in egalitarianism either is or ought be ending oppression. And then she extrapolates from there, like, since oppression is socially imposed, it's about creating a community of equals. And then from there is where you get, like, the further concerns. So I think that's kind of like the core there, which obviously doesn't address any, like, luck at all, which is the difference.
See, that's the problem I guess I kind of had with the structure of this paper is she seems to critique luck egalitarianism on the basis of believing that that's the only value, not the core value. A lot of her critique seems to be aimed at the people who think that that's the only value, because she raises exceptions. Or okay, let's abstract it a little bit. You could say we don't have to think about, like, what specific people think, but she might want to, or we could phrase the debate as, okay, if this is your value, what do you get? What does that value logically give you, right? And if this is your value, what does that logically give you, right? Yeah. So here's what I think is, like, I don't know, but I think it's missing from this paper. She rightly points out that if luck egalitarianism is your only value, then it results in these problems. And we've talked about some of those already, right? But then she doesn't I don't think she fairly puts forth her own view as, if the expression of capabilities is your only value, what does that logically get you? She seems to sort of open it up as the core value, but not the only value, while attacking luck egalitarianism under the guise of, if this is your only value, not your core value.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I fully grasp, but maybe this doesn't address your question, but I think she does kind of say to her own, like, democratic equality, like, this is what you get with it as your only value. I think she does say that.
Okay.
I mean
she does. Well, no, that's important. If that's what she says, then I have different problems with it, because then I think she actually imports, like, she brings in a lot of things implicitly then, I think.
She may. That's a good point. I don't know that for sure. But I think it's not that necessarily like in terms of all values and like as individuals or as a society. She's specifically critiquing egalitarianism.
Yeah.
Like the root of egalitarianism was this. Current literature is about this for whatever reason. And so it seems like this is an entire conversation within the scope of a value, not necessarily like all. Like she's saying there, I mean, it might be true that a lucky egalitarian might hold other values that would kind of prop up their theory. But she's saying, you know, if the point of egalitarianism is to end oppression, their, you know, lucky egalitarianism doesn't do that, even if other of their values would, you know, help patch together.
Yeah,
that's how I'm reading this.
I think
she may I understand, very well import other things.
I think I understand the current state of my criticism with the paper then, which is good. Because again, my current understanding might change by the end of the episode. But I think that my current criticism is, she rightly points out that if you're sort of a deontologist about luck egalitarianism, so you're not allowed to import concerns about anything else, then you're rightly going to have serious problems like the ones we've talked about, right? But she doesn't make it clear, at least, that, because I don't know, it's an open question to me whether the more pluralistic luck egalitarian can create just as good an outcome and maybe conserve some things that like her theory can't. I don't know. I think she criticizes.
That might be like, if we find a good response to this paper, we might be able to see what like lucky egalitarians are able to do that she isn't, because obviously she doesn't say like, oh crap, mine doesn't do this.
Well, I thought I raised that like a potential one for that.
You raised a potential what?
A potential example of where luck egalitarians could do that, but she wouldn't.
Am I completely blanking?
Dude, the more sad thing is I'm blanking on it.
On your example?
Yeah.
On my own. It was the example about like, you know, like a small amount of money being paid for like deaf children to hear.
I don't know if that was that example.
I don't think that was, because we kind of discussed that. Adam, you actually raised the point that she probably would argue for the hearing.
I'm not actually sure about that. After that conversation, I'm actually not sure about that she would, because
one of the things that makes it difficult to address that question is that most of this paper discusses kind of like in ideal situations, and she doesn't really say what to do in our various failings as a society to reach her, you know, her goal.
Giffin, like, why don't we just talk about what her view is so that we don't have to keep kind of dancing around it? I think that's a good thing to do.
Because like just kind of going off real quickly here though, because one of the reasons that is actually what Giffin was just talking about, makes me think in fact she might not actually kind of subscribe to a position where the state intervenes to prevent deafness in children. Is she does mention that deaf individuals seem to have the same spectrum of happiness and fulfillment in their lives, and that any problems they do experience are actually due to like Giffin said, oppression. Exactly. And that's actually,
and I disagree with that view.
And it's not the deafness itself that we should target, but the oppression. So I actually kind of go back and I don't think she.
That is one of the definitely the most contentious points of her framework. And like it's very interesting because you see the conflicting values here is like the respect to all individuals, but also the practical reality and how that informs your view.
Yeah.
I think I do get her perspective though, because it's like, I mean, consider this, like none of us are as smart as an individual like Stephen Hawking, right?
Yeah.
But
Jordan B. Peterson.
Jordan. Excuse
None
me,
of us are quite Rogan.
Dr. Jordan B. Peterson.
Yeah. So, editor, clean that up. It was doctor all along.
but like having like the fact that we aren't as smart as those, you know, whatever individual you want to kind of just put out there is sort of like the paragon of modern intelligence or whatever.
Yeah.
But like Peterson.
I'm sorry. I
All
messed
too
you.
easy.
I messed you up. Continue.
Yeah.
But I think we don't think our lives are necessarily like, miserable to live, even though we don't. I mean, maybe if we were to kind of like switch between those two perspectives, suddenly coming back to just like, some intelligence that's within the regular spectrum, like regardless of how smart
the all things considered approach.
Yes, no one on this podcast is a genius. Okay, so
especially not this episode.
Yeah, no, this episode is a disaster. But everyone on this podcast is quite smart. But no one here is a true genius.
No.
But what would that be like, right?
Exactly.
But we don't know, obviously. So, but we don't think our lives miserable. Just knowing that there is a kind of a higher level of perceiving the world. So
that is perfect example.
I do understand her perspective in that sense that deaf people don't know what they're missing in that sense. So the real problem is like, is the way in which those people suffer as a result of
I remember my example now. You made me. It was exactly like this. So okay, basically, here was my reductio to her view. Right, she is unable to. It was exactly the point you're making, Adam. Except it was just a personality trait. Like I was saying, I wrote down like, okay, what if someone just had like a greater ability for love, right, or like compassion, or just to kind of like like be compassionate in that Buddhist sense, right? That is something that we don't currently have access to, but it would be a better existence if we had it. And you can't cash out the fact that we don't have that ability to feel deeper love in terms of oppression, right? It's just luck. There are people, the ability to feel or express any genetic any personality trait is going to come down to genetics plus randomness, right? So it's all brute luck in that sense. And then option luck as you choose to either kind of develop that or not, right? So that is an example that is outside the purview of the value of eliminating oppression, right? But it's one that could be conserved by the luck egalitarian. So what does she do with that? I mean, the problem from my perspective is she would have to regress to the capabilities approach thing, right? But then
I don't think she.
But my point.
Oh yeah, sorry.
But my point was going to be, but then capabilities are getting cashed out in luck terms. So then it's actually, so I think that her view is a really important value, but I don't know if I would make it my core value. I think that like
certainly not your only.
Well, but I wouldn't make anything my only. I mean, in terms of like, you know what I mean?
If I had to guess,
hatred is my core value.
Lust.
What I think she would say to that example, Jordan, about the empathy is she says that has no role to play in equality, in egalitarianism. And then the conversation would be over.
I would totally disagree with that. Then
she would then say you can invoke other things in order to like argue for it, but it just wouldn't be from a.
But I think that's a mistake of the status quo bias. Don't you think?
No, Jordan. Hang on, because like the way I view this is like, and give me a second to actually kind of get out these ideas, but it almost seems like you're like describing a situation in which the entire bell-shaped curve is like shifted one direction or the other, where like the population at large, like regardless of like the millions of different attributes they have, if we could maximize like just like love and compassion in people at large, I think she would approve of that, right?
No,
but it's the idea that there are differences in people now that we're trying to rectify, right? So the thing is like, I think it'd be close. Like a closer example would be, okay, there are differences in people, like you said, in compassion, which could lead to like better lives. Okay, so in the context of this conversation, the question could be, do we compensate those with less compassion who live more miserable lives as a result? You know what I mean? Rather
Yeah.
than like, bringing everybody to that level.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So
It sounds like a more
do you get my
reasonable
perspective there?
example of
I
the.
actually do. My question is, on what basis is she able to say we should bring everyone up? Because because her whole discussion of the deaf community made me question whether she would say that or not. Because doesn't that seem so? Oh, okay, that seemed to me. So that was my other like stem of the critique is she criticizes luck egalitarianism as being extremely paternalistic. I think paternalism, if her view is to end up as a reasonable one, has to creep back in because of
Wait.
exactly
Where exactly?
in the sense that to allow people to maximize the expression of their capabilities, we actually do have to be paternalistic in some ways, right? So,
Well, that's what I'm asking you for that example.
well, yeah. So I was about to.
Yeah, of course.
So with Adam's example, where what?
No, we're just off tonight because of the COVID brain here. Like the conversations are having right now are just like very.
I know it's going to take a lot of editing.
Yeah, very very stunted. So
yes, yeah, I agree. Probably also due to the length of the paper, but
True.
Damn, what was I saying?
You were going to give the example.
So Adam's example of people can be on various parts of the spectrum of compassion, right? Yeah. And that's brute luck, what you're born with, and then the option luck is kind of how that cashes out in terms of, do you use that to better your life or worsen it, right? Mm-hmm. Adam said that, and this would be a reasonable decision if we could bring people up, if there was some $10 genome fix for people on the really low end of compassion to bring them up. We should do that. And Adam thought she would do that too. Now, here's my problem. I think she should do that because I think that that's the only reasonable thing to do, right? But to do that is extremely paternalistic in saying we think that this type of life is not as valuable or is not as good a life as one in this range of the compassion scale, right? And we have good reasons to think that. So what we're going to do is, for those people born with a lack of empathy or lack of compassion, we're going to bring them up to our level. That's an extremely paternalistic thing to do, but I think rightly so. So she paints paternalism as something to be avoided at all costs, and I'm disagreeing with that. And I'm saying that if her view doesn't then bring some paternalism back in, it's actually a pretty unreasonable view.
I'm just wondering, like, her critique of paternalism, like, does it relate specifically to like adults? Because I think there's like an idea.
I think she does.
Because like it's like, okay, I don't know if she would be against paternalistic behavior for infants, right? Like that's our job as adult members of society to make those decisions and say, actually, hey, there's this new technology that would bring new members into this world with just high levels of compassion that will lead to better lives for them. That would be paternalistic behavior toward the unborn.
Can I ask a follow-up question then? Let's not talk about what we would do, but just in terms of pure valuing then. So, okay, as adults, like, there's been the brute luck and the expression of option luck at this point, right? There's obviously a spectrum of compassion for adults. Excuse me, in purely value terms, I am still extremely reasonable, or I'm Jesus.
Good to know.
I am still, and you will be too, if only you agree. Jesus. Oh, that brain fog is just hammering me right now. I think that it is objectively true to say that people with a deficit of compassion live objectively worse lives than people in the normal to higher range, right? Like, for instance, in like a Frankfurtian sense, I would give myself a shot if it raised my compassion level by 10%. right? And I think that I would be wrong to not have enough compassion to even get that decision off the ground. Can her view, so what I'm saying is like she chastises paternalism from the luck egalitarian perspective, but I think that her view actually entails just as much in the expression of people's capabilities, but she doesn't want to do that. But I think she either has to like sneakily put that back into her view, or it's actually really unreasonable.
I guess I didn't understand your perspective there, like, because I guess clarify for me on this point, like,
Okay.
are you saying, okay, so there's going to be some segment of the population as adults,
Mm-hmm.
if the shot were available to raise their compassion, they in fact wouldn't get the shot because there could be a multitude of reasons why they don't,
Yeah.
but one of them could be just a lack of compassion in the first place.
Exactly.
I guess my question is this then, like, under her view, I don't think she would require that you get the shot, right?
Well, I wasn't saying
guess,
require. I wanted to take actions out of it. I don't even know how she could, because we were talking about like the core values of it. On her view, how do you even get that value off the ground?
I'm sorry, can you clarify that?
How do you get the value that it's objectively better for people to take the shot, right? The people who are low on compassion, without then bringing back in that paternalism.
I don't know that she would actually. I don't know that she would actually say that it's necessary for egalitarianism to address the shot question. I think it might be helpful here to read like her definition in her.
Can we do this?
Poem.
Can we take a short break? I needed to pee, and I want to get like some more tea, and then let's actually just talk about her view.
Yeah.
Does that sound okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. All right, I'll be right back.
Giffin, you agree though that does seem like outside the like the confines of this discussion, right? Does it not? Like his example there, because it seems like,
so the question is like there is a spectrum of compassion. I was actually just about to read. I think this will actually help. If you want to go to page 313, this is where she actually contrasts the main points of democratic equality versus luck egalitarianism, and she says equality of fortune is a distributive theory. It conceives of equality as a pattern of distribution. This would obviously be the pattern of compassion. That would be the distribution of compassion in this case. And then she says, you're equal as long as you have equal amounts of some distributable good in the view of luck egalitarians. And then she said, by contrast, democratic equality regards two people as equal when each accepts the obligation to justify their actions by principles acceptable to the other, and in which they take mutual consultation, reciprocation, and recognition for granted. And that's a very, very long assessment, but that is the contrast with the pattern of distribution. So depending on how like Jordan's compassion fits into that part of the democratic equality, it may or may not fit. It may or may not be subject to, her concern.
Let me read that line here.
What's that?
Let me just read that line again myself.
Page 313.
It's a little
the bottom,
wordy, is it not?
I literally underlined it and I wrote,
Yeah. Let me read that again myself here.
Yeah, because I mean that's the key to this question here is whether or not it fits into this or any of the other points that she says, like in contrasting them.
I guess I just don't understand that line at all, because I
challenging line.
Because I don't see how that could actually obtain, right? Because like democratic equality regards two people as equal, okay?
Yes.
When each accepts the obligation to justify, so they're obliged to justify their actions by principles acceptable to the other. Well, I don't see how that's going to work, because what is that? People who have explained their actions to me, and I do not find their principles acceptable.
I'm reading further on onto the next page to see if she says it a little easier. Hmm. So on the beginning of 314, she does say, this implies, third, that democratic equality is sensitive to the need to integrate the demands of equal recognition with those of equal distribution. So it seems like there's the question of whether such a person would be, the circumstances are one that makes like a relationship unequal, and then second of all is whether or how to remedy that. That's the beginning of 314, is like the goods must be distributed according to principles and processes that express respect for all. So it's kind of a two aspects here, it seems.
What were you guys talking about?
We were kind of just prepping for when your return about your concern and the question and trying to fit it into Anderson's model. We're at page 313 and 314.
Why don't you go ahead and just tell me, like, Giffin, how do you view what her positive proposal is? Because like I think that's just a good, like, for me especially, but also I mean for the episode. You know what I mean?
With
like,
respect, just the whole thing, not with respect to your question.
Yeah, just in general terms. Because we've beat around the bush with that for too long. Like I may even edit this and put it closer to the episode, just because like we should have. You know what I mean? So explain to me, because I think you're obviously the best reader of this paper at this, so far. So like what? You're better. You're better than old Fog brains over here.
Fog 1 and Fog 2. I'm trying to find like a specific quote.
Or even just in your own words, like how, I mean,
oh yeah. So basically she just wants to reframe the entire debate about egalitarianism to address what the point was originally / should be now.
Yeah.
And that is to say, it doesn't, the point of egalitarianism isn't specifically to address brute luck. It is actually to make a community of equals, like / end oppression, whatever conception, is preferred in this case. There are some specific details that she lays out that make it a little bit difficult, and that only really appear in her section, the second part of the paper, like what is democratic equality. But broadly, I kind of agree with like the framing. I don't think she would say that like this should be the only thing we should consider, like egalitarianism in society's construction, but it is the main, like it is a central pillar of like the discussion. I kind of do agree, like it seems to have a lot of desirable features. It doesn't seem to like, well, I mean, all the criticisms of like egalitarianism that I thought were pretty valid. So she seems to address most of those here. But again, how should I say this? I do think it is a worthwhile goal to reframe the discussion about egalitarianism to focus on oppression.
Yeah,
that makes sense to me, and it is able to disregard some of the odd conversations that we read in like egalitarianism. She calls.
Wait, hold on. I'm sorry. Just a clarifying question before you continue, because this is good. Because it seems, does she say, which one does she say is actually her core value? The prevention of oppression or creating a community of equals?
I think she said there's two.
The latter.
I think it's two. I think she says there is a negative aspect and a positive aspect.
Oh, I remember a quote about that.
Yeah, I don't. I think it's on one of these pages. I just don't see it in front of me immediately.
Because that was another. I don't mean to like bring up questions already, but I need to understand exactly what she says.
Yeah.
Because I think that one of those entails the negation of the other.
Hold on, I think it's actually on the previous page. Hold on.
Oh yeah, Giffin, you're totally right. Yeah.
This is the very beginning of part 2. What is the point of equality? Is this section's?
What page? What page?
313. If you want to get exactly what she says here, because first, democratic equality aims to abolish socially created oppression. Equality.
Yeah. So,
should we keep going there?
I was going to say that is where she contrasts democratic equality with the equality of fortune, but previously is where she makes the positive and negative aspects clear. And you can read that part, but I do want to read this part first. She says this is the bottom of 312, egalitarian political movements oppose such hierarchies. You know, she talked about that previously. Negatively, the claim repudiates distinctions of moral worth based on birth or social identity, on family membership, inherited social status, race, ethnicity, gender, etc. You know, there's no natural slaves, plebes, or aristocrats. And then positively, the claim asserts that all competent adults, that's actually good to know, adults. So she actually, this whole conversation about competent adults. So that's actually good to know. She doesn't define any of this, but anyways, the claim asserts that all competent, positive,
no negative adults shall have rights.
No, the natural slave class.
Those born without compassion do not have rights.
The claim asserts that all competent adults are equally moral agents. Everyone equally has the power to develop and exercise moral responsibility, to cooperate with others according to principles of justice, to shape and fulfill a conception of their good. So that's kind of like the two frameworks. And it's not, you know, clearly well defined. She tables a lot of things, like it's framed within the space of competent adults. She doesn't really define it. I can't imagine how long this paper would be if she had to define all of these components.
Of course.
It would. She probably maybe she ought to have split this into like egalitarian bad, and then second paper like, you know, democratic equality good. But either way, so that's the aspect about like the negative and positive aspects. And then the beginning of the next page actually says similarly, negatively, egalitarians seek to abolish oppression. And then positively, egalitarians seek a social order in which persons stand in relations of equality. So that's the negative and positive aspect to it. And they may conflict, Jordan, and I imagine that's what you're going to bring up. And then after that, she discusses the specific aspects of democratic equality, like the goals, like these are the aims, compared to egalitarianism. And Adam, you were starting to read this, and you can go ahead and read that if you'd like. There's three of them, I think.
So first, democratic equality aims to abolish socially created oppression. Equality of fortune aims to correct what it takes to be injustices created by the natural order. Second, democratic equality is what I shall call a relational theory of equality. In other words, it views equality as a social relationship. Equality of fortune is a distributive theory of equality. It conceives of equality as a pattern of distribution. So that clarifies a bit.
It does.
So thus, equality of fortune regards two people as equal so long as they enjoy equal amounts of some distributable good, income, resources, opportunities for welfare, and so forth. Social relationships are largely seen as instrumental to generating such patterns of distribution. By contrast, democratic equality regards two people as equal when each accepts the obligation to justify their actions by principles acceptable to the other, and in which they take mutual consultation, reciprocation, and recognition for granted. It's a mouthful.
That's a bulky.
Yeah. So
I have okay. Is there more that we should talk about in her view before I raise the criticisms? Because I don't know. The more we read,
I will actually contribute something, I think. From what I gathered from those first 2 points where she contrasts them is that within the view of egalitarianism, social relationships are an instrument to generate the goal of like the pattern distribution, right? Yeah. Whereas she would say this patterns of distribution or redistribution generally is instrumental to creating, or can be instrumental to creating the proper social relationships, which is the goal. I think that's kind of the key here. So I do think she said it's not non-distributive, but it's not strictly distributive, if that makes sense.
This actually mirrors a lot of the discussion, at least the holistic vibes, if you will, of the previous paper that we were talking about, right? How retributive justice, or like justice as we currently have it, is very cold and calculating, and it removes the individuals in question. She's essentially kind of making a very similar point against egalitarianism. Like, it's very cold and it's not based, it's using people's social status and interactions as a tool to get material equality, and that's bad. Like I agree with that wholeheartedly. You might sense there's a but coming, but I'm sorry, but Giffin, did you have more?
No, that's it. I'm waiting for your butt.
Okay, here's what I don't understand about this proposal. It seems like the negative and the positive claims that she has can very obviously come at odds to each other, right? So she says that negatively, it repudiates distinctions of moral worth based on birth or social identity, or on family membership, inherited social status, race, ethnicity, gender, or genes, right? That's the luck part, kind of cashed out in her own terms. But then positively, the claim asserts that all competent adults are equally moral agents. Everyone equally has the power to develop and exercise moral responsibility, to cooperate with others according to principles of justice, and to shape and fulfill a conception of their good. Okay. And she thinks that more positive move really negates the paternalism of luck egalitarianism, where the paternalism there, I take it, is that, oh, poor you, she paints it as like a very pitying picture. I thought a little bit unfairly, but I've already made that clear. Okay.
I thought that as well at first, to be frank. Yeah.
Here's my question, like with her view though. Take an example of and she brings up examples that are close to this. We can find them if we want, but like a very just take like a community from like the racist South in the 1960s, right?
Sure.
1950s, let's make it. So, they're obviously incredibly immoral and denigrating. No, sorry, not denigrating, diminishing of people's status, like the Jim Crow laws, right?
Of course.
Okay, those laws are obviously something that a luck egalitarian would be against, and she would be against, right? Because on the luck egalitarian view, it's punishing people for arbitrariness,
For
right?
brute luck, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And on her view, people are obviously
That's not even
equal.
not addressing, it's punishing.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
And on her view, I take it that she would respond that, okay, that's not good because it doesn't treat people as equal citizens, right? Okay, here's my criticism then. She has to be paternalistic to make that claim. She has to say, and I'll find more examples of this because I have like notes written down. She has to value negative freedom over positive freedom. She has to value freedom from over freedom to do things, right? So she has to be committed to like the paternalistic value of saying, okay, no, your racism, like your obsession with oppressing this group of people based on arbitrary factors, is not a valid value in our system, because it doesn't allow people to be equals. But the problem is that so long as you grant that there will be people who hold stupid views like that, she has to treat them as kind of unequal. But it's because of the brute fact that they were born in fucked up societies themselves, right? So okay, I know I made that in like a really circuitous way, but what do you guys think of that point, that she has to be paternalistic in exactly the same ways she criticized luck egalitarians as being paternalistic in?
That's a very good point. Can she define? I mean, I don't know if she successfully defines paternalism well enough in order to even,
I don't think she
even
really
for
does.
her own like good.
Yeah.
And that would be a pretty key criticism.
Well, can I give I thought a working definition of paternalism when she defined it was making an objective claim that some people's values are better than others, right? Or that some values, you don't have enough to say people's values, some values are better than others. Because she made that point like, well, it's wrong to like pity someone for being deaf, right? Like she painted that as like being the very pitying view, right? But I thought that she stacked the examples really well.
You know what might be enlightening here? Do you remember the example that she gave? Maybe we talked about this already, about the person who might value above their own, like the the
The organ
religious
selling?
donations
Oh,
or whatever it was. Organ selling might be another good example.
I thought
That's relevant.
the
It's like
organ selling.
your question hinges on like about the paternalism hinges on how she explains those cases, and I don't remember fully. Because clearly,
let's find one of those cases.
I think she
then.
basically would broadly say like it's not that we're choosing a value; it's that it's irrelevant because of this other thing that is invoked first.
Yeah.
But it very very close reading will determine whether that's actually paternalistic or not.
Okay.
I don't remember where this is.
I should have marked like where different things came up. I mean,
there's so many things to mark though. It's such a
that was the problem. In hindsight, to be honest, I should have had different problems like in a Word document and then quotes addressing those problems. But like,
okay, I found it. I 100%
Okay.
found it. 319.
319. Thank you.
Because she posits herself. Isn't it paternalistic Isn't it paternalistic to deny her the freedom to trade, in it and inalienable rights? So this is like second paragraph.
Which specific example was this? It was
319 second paragraph, and then this is she's broadly talking about
okay.
inalienable rights.
Yeah.
She doesn't say anything specific, but I think she does later down.
Mm-hmm.
So again, the question is, why shouldn't she be free to trade some of her egalitarian guaranteed freedoms for other goods that she prefers? This is kind of, I think, in the scope of what we were discussing.
Yeah.
Isn't it paternalistic to deny her the freedom to trade? Right? Are we not, like, in the denial, aren't we invoking some sort of evaluation of, like, her values? And then the next paragraphs must address that, or at least
I have it.
do.
Yeah, I have the quotes. She says Kant would put it in the following terms: every individual has a worth or dignity that is not conditional upon anyone's desires or preferences, not even the individual's own desires. So she's saying in non-Kantian locution that basically you don't get to void your status as an intrinsic good. Like you don't get to, so like under her view, each individual has inalienable rights, and you don't get to like void those rights of anyone, and anyone includes yourself. I think that that's totally fucking reasonable, but I think that that's really paternalistic. Like I think that she highlighted the dangers of paternalism with like egalitarianism fairly well. Yeah, like, but I also think that she did a lot of spinning. Right, she spun it as like contemptuously pitying people, which, like, Rakowski might, or well, Rakowski actually pitied no one, as we saw, but right, like, okay, so her concern is completely valid. We don't want to pity people, and like that gets cashed out in like a lot of ableist ways, right? We don't want to pity people who have certain disabilities or handicaps, but I think that paternalism absolutely has to play a role if you're going to have some sort of a hierarchy of values, which she obviously does. You have to be able to like say, no, you're actually wrong, like to want to express this value. And she does it here. Like she's actually saying, okay, the value of preserving the dignity or intrinsic worth of the individual trumps even that individual's desires. I'm sorry, but how is that not paternalistic?
Yeah, I think that would be a great question. I would be very curious to see how she answers that.
I just thought like paternalism reemerged in all of the ways she criticized luck egalitarianism for having it. So like, so go back to my example, right? Like, so she criticized luck egalitarians for pitying people who were deaf or who weren't as smart, like, oh, poor idiots, right? And she kind of painted that as like a really sneering thing to do, right? But so there so if you look at what's underneath that is the value of it's better to be more competent than less, essentially, right? And she was saying that it's paternalistic to kind of have that hierarchy of values. But if she has the goal of eliminating oppression and thus having people have equal status, you have to be paternalistic in precisely that same way, because people aren't going to just agree. Like in a, like a kumbaya world, like we all are equal and everyone thinks everyone else is equal. Yeah, but like we don't really have to worry about like egalitarianism at that point. She puts herself or just like reality puts her in the position of saying, no, like your racist attitudes towards you don't want to have to serve Black people or something like that. That's not a legitimate value in our society.
So yeah, it seems like there may be one deep kernel of paternalism. So I'm reading here. This is still on 319.
Okay.
Basically, okay. Let me get
What paragraph?
I think it's the same one where she discusses Kant, but at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
In basing inalienable rights on what others are obligated to do,
Mm-hmm.
rather than on the right bearer's own subjective interests, democratic equality satisfies the second desideratum of egalitarian theory to justify lifetime guarantees without resorting to paternalism. So basically, it kind of is already built in the idea that the obligations are present.
Mm-hmm.
If you kind of already agree that the obligations are there, then all other aspects of paternalism can go away, but that in and of itself may be paternalistic.
Yeah. Okay.
I
So,
think that kind of captures the concern.
but I think that would be gravely misrepresenting the argument to say that, oh, our system doesn't have the issues of paternalism, where it's like, well, no, after the most paternalistic assumption ever. You know what I mean?
After the grand paternalism, you don't need any further paternalisms. It's basically what she's claiming.
I guess I even disagree with but I think that does get cashed out in extremely paternalistic details. So just mirror this again. In basing inalienable rights on what others are obligated to do rather than on the rights bearer's own subjective interest, democratic equality satisfies the second desideratum of egalitarian theory to justify lifetime guarantees without resorting to paternalism. But okay, yeah, that's what I think that to justify lifetime guarantees is extremely paternalistic, but in a good way. I guess have I'm slightly more okay with authoritarian aspects of paternalism, in the sense that we just do have to make those values. We do have to make those value claims. It's no, you actually don't get to do certain things.
Of all the things she criticized, I think the paternalism one was one where I kind of had the most uncertainty for sure.
Yeah.
And I would really like to see her response to hey, you've buried the paternalism in already to the model, and therefore all further ones may not be needed, but you have the one to begin with. That's a very interesting.
The gays and lesbian point that she made, it's in the next paragraph, I thought really exemplified this point too. Because, right, so she says on top of 320, gays and lesbians seek the ability to publicly reveal their identities without shame or fear, which requires significant changes in social relations of contempt and hostility, and changes in some norms of gender and sexuality. Bingo, I completely agree. However, that entails paternalism. That entails saying the value of being a homophobe is trumped by the value of expressing who you are, your sexual identity. And I think that is a legitimate case of paternalism. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't think you need to invoke either of their values in order to make that. It's if you accept the obligations that are there, you can simply say you've betrayed your obligation and nothing further.
See, but I don't think, but
there's still the original paternalism of that framework, perhaps.
Okay, but that almost relies on this idealized image of what a person should be, right? So it's okay, so just if you take it on board, okay, the homophobic person, at their core, is a homophobic person, right? It's just part of their identity, deeply. Just think back, to people of our grandfather's generation when they were growing up, right? Or even just further back, or whatever, right? That is who they are at their core. And so I think her position either collapses into one of two things that she chastises luck egalitarianism for. It either collapses into this assumption about what the rational kind of third party, or that person's best self, ideally rational self, would think or do, or it's just paternalistic, right? Because it's not equal to be because it's not, I don't know, I don't think it makes sense. I think you have to really kind of twist your wording to paint valuing certain things always in terms of making people equal, right? Like, because you're okay, I'm really butchering my wording here. I don't know, do you kind of get what I'm saying? I'll try to make it again. I'll try to make it really succinctly. You have to say to the people who want to discriminate based on race, and there's whole communities based around that from like the 50s in the South, right?
Of course.
You have to say, no, you don't get to do that in our society because we value other things over that. That's denying certain, you can't say then that everyone gets to equally express themselves or their values or whatever. But we're actually fine to say that. Like, I don't know, that's kind of what I'm trying to get at. Like, she hinges it on like treating everyone as an end in and of themselves. Okay, but what if that person as an end wants to do something that is incompatible with someone else being treated as an end in and of themselves? Then you have to make a hierarchy of values choice. And that seems really paternalistic. I'm sure I could make the point like way better if I was actually of sound mind.
I think I understand your point.
I hopefully I'm at least making good points in a very poor way.
No, you make sense.
Yeah.
Again, it seems to come down, she really needs to explain her objections with paternalism. If it's not the paternalism itself, it's what aspect of the paternalism that she disagrees with.
Yeah.
And how they would be resolving in the issues we've discussed. Because like you said, like the values seem to have to come into play in the acceptance of the system of democratic equality. After that, I think you can resolve all the issues without specifically invoking a paternalism of the situation, but the paternalism has simply been absorbed into the system, and thus you can't say there's no paternalism.
That comes down to...
Oh, yeah. I don't know. Again, this may simply hinge on her conception of paternalism being slightly different. I don't know if that's actually something broadly informed by like lucky egalitarianism literature, or if that's just like something that she just simply failed to explain enough, which is probably
that actually perfectly brings me to my next criticism, which was she explicitly says, actually in the one that I said, a lot of her values of treating people equally requires changes in norms of gender or sexuality, or changes in social relations of contempt and hostility, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this was my other potential critique of this. In order to do that, how exactly does that get cashed out in actionable terms, right? So like, this comes back to my opening remarks, essentially, of like, these things have to get done in some sense, right? Because she's either making this claim about this ideal world in which everyone does have the right changes in social relations and norms, but then we don't really have to worry about these concerns. But the luck egalitarian on their side says, wow, we can't legislate things like changes in norms of gender or sexuality, changes in norms or cultural practices, right? This is actually the very point that a lot of people today make with calling for like affirmative action or something like that. We've legislated racial inequality out of the legal code, but we haven't actually changed the social practices of it, right? So the luck egalitarian on their side says, wow, the things that we want to change are actually possible to change, because it does. She criticizes it as being cashed out in cold kind of monetary or property terms. But how do you legislate for the changes that she needs in order for her system to get off the ground? On the luck egalitarian side, they can say, well, at least it's possible to do ours, but
I don't know that that's necessarily true of luck egalitarianism. I don't know if it's actually true to legislate theirs. If we're talking about like true practice.
Well, it's much to a much higher degree than is possible.
That seems fair. I don't know for sure. But what I will say is, if you look at she doesn't explain how to get any of these at all. She contributes like basically
No, but
none of them.
I'm not. I'm saying it's impossible to. Like,
Yeah,
but
I would disagree with.
Well, no, but if you actually could, it would be paternalism like dialed to 11, because it would be like we need to actually orchestrate. We need to overcome who people are essentially in order to get the norms and practices to the point where everyone can be equally respected in society.
So specifically through the lens of paternalism, let me rephrase this because there is an example we can look at.
Yeah.
Is it paternalistic for society to legislate there must be ramps accessible to courtrooms?
Yes, but I think in a good way. Like,
do you think it is paternalistic and therefore, like, Anderson can't address? Or
no, but it's inconsistent.
Yeah.
Because it's saying, okay, because it's saying, look, for the people for whom this would cost a ton of money, think of everyone who owns property, like public property. You have to pay to put like accessibility ramps in, accessibility elevators, accessibility bathrooms. Well, a ton of money. She's saying, okay, a lot of people will value keeping their money and not catering to the small percentage of the population who needs those, right? Yeah. She's saying, we don't respect that value. We actually respect the value of everyone being able to operate or function or express their capabilities in an equal way. So yeah, it's extremely paternalistic, I think. She's saying, no, you're actually wrong to hold this value. And what's more, we're going to legislate that you have to, well, you can't legislate that you have to hold this value. This gets to my other criticism. We're going to legislate that you have to spend the monetary funds to make it possible for that value. But like, what does it mean to actually, like, you can't legislate out a norm or a social practice. So like, I think all of her proposals are parasitic on paternalism, but put in practice, they like go way overboard for paternalism. Because the luck egalitarian can say, yeah, all of that really, really sucks. But at least
let's use something concrete here. So in the case of like someone who, doesn't have access to like the capacity to walk, right?
Yeah.
Let's go in both instances. So clearly, in Anderson's case, she would say something like, currently our society does not grant you access, to those necessary, capacity to engage in, whatever public life, whatever, yada, yada.
Sure.
And so there must be ramps, and then that will allow them to access that, and then
to express themselves fully. Yeah.
Whatever the individual aspects are.
Yes.
And then how does luck egalitarianism address this?
Well, I don't know how, but on the basis of it, they would say this is an instance of brute luck where some people don't either don't benefit or suffer, like what valence you want to put it, right? Based on brute luck factors, right? And so to solve this, we can they might say we can either compensate them, or they might say, we can just like create a new tax, right? And then pay to like do all of this stuff with that, or whatever. But don't hinge it on how it gets laid out, because I think how it gets enacted is open to either view. But it's like, but like the values are different, and I think her values are self-contradictory.
With respect to paternalism, it may be, but in this case that we're talking about, if you're using the brute luck distinction, this actually excludes people who made that U-turn.
Where's the paternalism defined again?
Like I don't know that it fully is.
Yeah, can we go back to that? Because I guess I'm just kind of lost here at this point, because for me, this is not at all how I interpreted what she was talking about. Like, because I always the way I read this was, it was paternalism with respect to seeming.
I have it.
Well, let me finish this thought though. But seeming like differences in people, like whether they be like immutable qualities or just attributes of people in that it's not up for the state to decide, what is, a congenital kind of burden, or what is a boon, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
but it seems like, but you're kind of almost like taking it further and saying, okay, well, it's not up for the state to decide which values we value. And it's like, I don't see why we can't distinguish between values, but under this model, the state doesn't distinguish and say, okay, these in fact are good traits, you are lucky. These in fact are bad traits, you are unlucky, and here is money to make up for that. But I don't see why that doesn't, like, I don't see how this precludes like distinguishing between good and bad values though.
So what I was saying is that I thought the very ways that she said luck egalitarianism was badly paternalistic, I thought that she did those same things, or they were entailed.
Could you bring up the part where she critiques? Okay, I just want to get a better understanding.
No, it's a good point. Okay, so the other luck egalitarians agree that pure equality of fortune might have to be modified by a significant dose of paternalistic intervention to save the imprudent from the worst consequences of their choices. However, in their view, only paternalistic reasons can justify making mandatory the various universal social insurance program characteristic of modern welfare states: Social Security, health and disability insurance, disaster relief, and so forth. Only paternalistic reasons justify meting out individuals' basic income grants on a monthly basis rather than a lump sum upon the coming of age. Call this the problem of paternalism. I summarized that as, quote, overprotection and regulation for people's best interests, essentially saying, you don't know what's good for you, we are going to legislate otherwise.
Or even more broadly, not just that you don't know what's good for you, because there was also like, I think it's more along the ideas like the state will take care of you.
Yeah.
Like regardless of whether it was brute luck, or even like if you were to open it up to option luck, you know what I mean? It's like, if you are like, because like she brings up the problem of like, the prudent.
And that was in the option luck. Yeah. Section.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, the paternalistic hand of the state is the state will take care of you. And that's the justification.
And that exact sense of we will take care of you seems to reemerge in her, we need to make sure that the social norms, back to the gays and lesbians example of hers, right? That is her saying, but all I'm saying is that.
But she does bring up the fact that some of these things need to be kind of grassroots, organization needs to kind of foster some of the, equality among peoples and attitudes, because you're talking about an attitudinal change here, and she's saying, well, you really can't legislate, and it's not up to the state to kind of coerce some attitudinal change. That is up to people ultimately for that to occur. So I don't think
but laws that prevent oppression, for instance, would be something that so like the abolition of Jim Crow laws or equal rights legislation, like that case from 2015, like the cake baker, remember?
Sure.
I'm just saying that seems paternalistic in the exact same ways, but all I'm saying is that's not wrong. Like to be paternalistic in certain ways isn't wrong.
I know she does comment on the role a democratic institution plays, where you have an elected body that was elected by a majority of the people that then go on to enact a legislation. So is that paternalistic whenever you've got
a body of
elected individuals, you know what I mean, kind of representing the people at large? It's because it's more of a ground up sort of.
Yeah.
I mean,
then it seems like, but doesn't it then seem like you can't end oppression and treat people as equals then? Because what if we just stipulate that We don't have to stipulate it, just rewind the clock, right? Like, what if the majority of the citizens of the country were in favor of segregation, like unequal segregation?
What do you think that would indicate?
Well, I think that then she would be faced with, okay, this party wants to govern itself, right? So that's sort of like the respect. That was how she avoided the paternalism, because it's not like some external entity like, oh, we'll take care of you. But then that, like we have seen in the history of the US, is just going to be like this starkly inegalitarian outcome.
Yeah, and so she would say that's, you haven't achieved equality there.
Yeah. So then I would respond, okay, so your system only works. So then she's relying on this thing that she again criticized like egalitarianism for, which is like, it relies on people's like abstract, rational best selves. Doesn't hers do the same thing then?
Well, I mean, it just kind of depends. Like, it's in one sense, it's like, okay, how does it get carried out versus like, what's the grounding for this? So like the grounding for it is, for achieving equalities, we want to eliminate oppression. I think that concept needs to be divorced from how that actually happens. Right. So it's like, okay.
Yeah. All I was saying is that value, ending oppression, can be directly in conflict with her other value of treating people as equal. Like, I take it that treating people as equal means that they get to, live out their desires and capabilities or whatever, right?
Well, I think she defines it like.
Okay, well,
how is that? Let's go
yeah.
exactly how she defines it.
Yeah, please.
It was the really wordy.
It was where she mentioned Kant, right underneath it.
All right, so this would be page 313, I believe.
Okay.
So, second, democratic equality is what I shall call a relational theory of equality. It views equality as a social relationship. Equality of fortune is a distributive theory of equality. It conceives of equality as a pattern of distribution. Okay. Thus, equality of fortune. Let's skip that here. Okay, here's
by contrast.
By contrast, okay. Exactly. By contrast, democratic equality regards two people as equal when each accepts the obligation to justify their actions
by principles acceptable to the other. And that is where, okay, by principles acceptable to the other, this is where she's either relying on this like really abstract version of like people's best rational selves, or it's entirely self-contradictory, because all you have to do is grant the possibility that the majority of the country or the nation of the state that she's describing doesn't hold egalitarian values. Then what? Like, if what she's saying is, if everyone has the right values, then this is how it should play out, then yeah, sure. But like, do you get like my criticism there? Because she says, okay, by contrast, democratic equality regards two people as equal when each accepts the obligation to justify their actions by principles acceptable to the other. 2 thumbs up when we're lucky enough that happens, right? So I take it that an instance of that would be me saying, I'm not particularly attracted to men, but I do not want to restrict the freedom of men who are attracted to other men to engage in any social context in which someone's relationship would be relevant. Marriage, adoption, right? Like those things.
Yeah.
Okay, boom. That's all works out.
Accepted by the other.
But what if I'm a homophobe and the majority of the country is, right? Then you're put in a position where after the when in that sentence isn't fulfilled. Okay, so then what? So then I'm saying the rational thing to do there would be paternalistic, saying we don't respect, we're not actually going to allow you to express your values or what you want to see happen in that way, because it's unjust.
I just
Well,
don't see it, because I think
No.
the goal is to like move toward that. I mean, think about like the majority of people like you interact with in your own life, right?
Mhm.
Where obviously it's a select few, right? But
Sure.
the way you view others and the way they view you is like, they they respect the justifications that you give for your own life,
Mhm.
and your friends, don't view you as unequal. So you might say, okay,
Yeah.
that relationship doesn't occur between everybody. No, of course not. But certainly the country is moving in that direction where lots of people in this country at this point can
Yeah.
recognize differences and different justifications, but can respect and understand different justifications. So it's like, is it for the state to mandate that everybody respect each other and and understand
Of course
each
not.
other's?
Yeah.
But no,
Yeah.
but I think that's certainly an honorable goal for equality, where it's like we're kind
Of
of moving that
course.
direction. So
Yeah.
But
And-
what I'm saying is, I don't understand how her view. The weird thing is like, I totally agree with how this gets expressed, but I don't know how she's grounding that, because like essentially so the example you just gave, like, our country, the US, is moving in that direction.
Yeah.
Right. But it seems to me that that is expressing at least a comfortableness, a very comfortable nature of being paternalistic towards the minority in those situations.
Can I maybe offer a comparison that might be useful?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think democratic equality is the goal, and the goal in itself does not involve paternalism. She does not actually make any claims about how to get there. That may involve paternalism. It may be inevitably involving paternalism. I think what she's saying is the goal of luck egalitarianism has to invoke paternalism, whereas the goal of democratic equality does not, even if getting there would. Does that make sense? With luck egalitarianism, it's distributive, and that requires.
Okay, that makes sense. But how does luck egalitarianism exert? How does luck egalitarianism have intrinsic to it paternalism in a way that her view doesn't, though? That's what I'm confused about.
Well, the point of the equality of fortune is like the equality of the distribution of goods, and you cannot possibly distribute the goods with assess and redistribute the goods without invoking paternalism, because it involves a state. I mean, it has
because because even in I take it that what you're saying is even in the situation where everyone does have the right attitudes, there's still going to be disparities in luck, right? And so in that, the paternalism comes out in that there has to be like this intrinsic pitying of people who are worse off.
Yeah, the only way inherently that luck egalitarianism can do the thing that its goal is to do has to involve paternalism. Now, in terms of like getting there, I think that's actually, you've made it clear that I don't think you can not invoke paternalism when you're saying like trying to get you right, when you're trying to get to democratic equality. You kind of have to. And like, I think all she is saying in this paper is this is the goal. And the goal itself doesn't involve paternalism. And then if you would maybe ask her like, okay, but if we want to get there as a society, like, in the conceivable future, will it involve paternalism on the part of like any entity? And she'll probably say, yeah. I mean, I don't know what she would say. She might reframe it, but I mean, it seems inconceivable to me that you could actually say no to that. Otherwise, you're just waiting. You're just waiting for things to align.
Giffin, I think you and I are on the same page. I definitely agree with that perspective at this point.
No, Jordan, I'm really glad you brought that up, because I actually it wasn't clear to me until we really hashed that out. And it unfortunately does kind of hinge on that long sentence on 313.
Yeah. I just worry that she's almost making a very circular claim. I just worry that she's making the claim that when people have the right attitudes, this is the system that we get to live in. And she's right about that claim. I just don't think that claim says a lot.
I mean, she doesn't address a lot of things. Like, she could definitely have written like another 50 pages on like what to do when we don't have democratic equality.
Yeah.
And that could involve paternalism to the nth degree, like you've described. But this is kind of just saying, this paper is basically, hey, luck egalitarians, which have dominated the literature, your goal is not the goal. And one of those reasons that it shouldn't be the goal is because it has to invoke paternalism, because the goal itself involves like state reallocation of goods. Does that make sense? I feel like that's a pretty acceptable definition.
Yeah. I guess maybe where I'm kind of landing is that I guess I'm in a weird position because I guess I'm kind of viewing like luck egalitarianism and her democratic egalitarianism. Like neither of those are the base value for me. It's like well-being and suffering is the base value. So then like what practical system best results in that?
But hang on, I gotta make this point though. But that's why it's like she incorporates like the role of the government here, where it's like, okay, under your system, or I guess I'll begin with her system. Under her system, when someone born with a club foot is treated well and respected by everyone in society, and the government provides a few key resources that ensure that everyone in society is an equal citizen. What role does the government have then to compensate that person born with the club foot under your system or under lucky egalitarianism?
Well, they already have compensated them, right? But just like they haven't cut them a check, but they've compensated them in that they've legislated and built a society such that that person can be an equal member, right?
Well, I mean, sort of, in the sense that, like, yeah, I mean, you can build things like, ramps and allow a person to function, within society fairly well. But there is still like some deeply unequal thing about being born with a club.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So it's like, okay, under luck egalitarianism, would you be compensated for that brute luck there, regardless of how well society at large sort of accommodates your issue?
Yeah, I think that would be paternalistic in a bad sense to do that. But I think that's kind of, but isn't that just like the really just worst version of luck egalitarianism? Like, my question is, I guess my question is like, she didn't make it clear in the paper to me why everything that she proposes can't be done congruently by the luck egalitarian. Like she gave really good examples of bad luck egalitarians. Do you know what I mean? But like, why, if you broaden the conception of luck like the tiniest bit, and I don't think in like a disingenuous way, it seems like you get everything that she wants, right? Like, because all you have to grant is that, someone with a clubbed foot, like, which is better, to be born in a clubbed foot, to be born in a clubbed foot?
What a horrible existence.
I'm sorry.
What would she have to say about that?
I'm sorry. Yeah, well, can
you would be paternalistic.
Can her of you handle that counter objection?
The case of the born in club foot.
He lives and dies within the clubbed foot. Don't you understand?
Where is democratic equality now?
He should be compensated.
Wait, before I lose this point, here's $1. Before I lose this point, please. Okay, is it better to be born with a clubbed foot in a world that doesn't allow you to really kind of be a full person? There's no accessibility ramps, yada yada, right? But you're compensated monetarily for your losses. Or is it, and I think the answer is obvious, is it better to be born with a clubbed foot in a world where you don't get monetary benefits, but through the use of monetary benefits, monetary resources, the world has been shaped such that you can live at the same kind of functional level as everyone else, even though you're still born out of that, right? I just don't understand. Wait, okay, it's obviously better for the second world, right? And I understand how
I disagree with the setup, though.
Well, do you know where it's going? Well,
I wanna hear them how-
but I already
hear them.
rejected at this point because both worlds, they have the ramps and everything in place, right?
no,
Like,
no, I wasn't saying that.
no, I'm
oh.
saying it has to be that way because I'm not gonna like concede that distinction there. I'm gonna say that like let's take out that variable entirely. Both worlds,
Okay, both worlds have the ramps.
They
yeah.
can function equally.
Okay.
Like both in both worlds.
And in world B, you're compensated for your bad luck monetarily. In world A, you're not.
In world A, you're not, but in world A, everybody, views you as an equal
Mm-hmm.
in all respects. But in the first world where you're monetarily compensated, they don't. Because
Isn't that
you're actually kind of a pitied person. In fact, you're someone that the state needs to take care of, needs to compensate for being born, with this congenital, abnormality.
Even if you
it's a perspective difference here.
Mm-hmm.
It's a perspective difference.
Yeah. Okay. So you're making the claim that by giving them money, it just is a fact that if we live in a world in which accessibility is not a problem.
Yeah.
It's just a fact of our psychology that we will pity people who receive additional aid on top of that.
Yeah, they'll pity themselves. Yeah.
I think
it's more like the state is
envy.
invoking pity in its redistribution.
Invoking pity in its redistribution.
Right. Like imagine that they both have like
wait, actually, let me just concede that point.
Cool. Yeah.
I think that that's exactly right. In that extremely idealized world. I just don't understand. Okay, so if that's all she's saying, I agree with it. But I thought she was saying more than that. Like
I think she's saying that explains, well, with the paternalism point, it's like, that's not there in this case because the state never had to come in and say, well, this is this is bad luck for you.
Wait, hold on. Adam's point is precisely right. And she should not bring in anything cultural about that then.
Yeah, I think it's really a perspective difference, a perspective change here.
But but to be honest, I think she didn't make the point in the way that you just did, where you actually have to lay out that psychological fact. Like and she doesn't I think she makes her case in a really poor way then.
Mm.
Like, because what you just added to her proposal is not present in there. Like you have to stipulate that the end goal is you actually have to give that thought experiment essentially, like for the point to land.
I think you do, just because it honestly took like 2 hours of talking about this for everything kind of crystallize. But it does make sense that she's saying like, okay, just here are all like the problems of compensating an individual like this. Here are the paternalism issue, the pity issue. And it's like, wouldn't it in fact just be better if there was just a perspective change in society? And that's what we're aiming for ultimately.
But she can't phrase it like that, right? She's got to say, wouldn't it be better, because we can't legislate attitudes, for us to just change society such that people of all luck outcomes are able to nullify those luck outcomes. Because it looks like she like disabuses luck. Actually, her proposal is like corely absorbing luck, but she's just trying to negate it in a way that actually respects people's autonomy better.
Well, the right kinds of luck also. She's defining the correct spaces that's relevant.
Yeah, but luck egalitarian has that open to them too. It's like, I think okay, now I actually understand what I think. I think she shoots herself in the foot essentially with the way she puts the argument together.
I'm curious how well like our reading of this has been informed by our previous two like arcs on morality. Mm-hmm. And because I'm curious if we had read this without those, if we would have the same kind of objections.
Maybe, but
I think, I mean, it's over 50 pages. It's going to be impossible for it to crystallize super easily.
I agree, but to be honest, like, don't you think it would actually be a much more reasonable proposal if she said, look, luck egalitarians are largely right, but they actually miss something crucial in focusing on physical or property or monetary ways to absolve differences in luck. But they're
Distributions of goods.
Thank you. That was distributions of goods. But they're actually quite right that it's abhorrent to us that people can be made to suffer due to bad luck. But here's a better way to actually resolve that in a way that conserves everything that luck egalitarianism rightly has to offer. Instead of talking about Rakowski's like, let them die on the streets, right? She should have said that and say, look, in a world in which someone who's born with a clubbed foot is able to live as an equal, they shouldn't get a monetary compensation, not because they don't deserve it, because they still might actually, but it would actually be worse for them because of the way it would affect their social interactions, which on an Aristotelian kind of like function as a person view is actually more at the core of what it means to live as a human being. Thus, she's almost like a strand of luck egalitarianism, but in like a more holistic way. She's like a holistic luck egalitarianism, which if that's her view, sign me up on the dotted line at this point. I think she shoots herself in the foot of how she argues for it.
I don't know that she would be a strand of luck egalitarianism.
Well, I think theoretically her view is actually, but based on what I just said.
Well, I thought I understood everything you were saying until you made that claim, and I didn't see how that followed.
I think it's a strand of luck egalitarianism in that its motivation is based on she's a strand of brute luck egalitarianism, because her whole thing is like, look, she focuses on very brute luck issues, right? She focuses on deafness, she focuses on sexual orientation, she focuses on disabilities, right? Those are extremely brute luck things. Because you don't choose any of those, presumably. But she, all she does, and I wish you would have, if this is what she means, it's actually really, really good. All she's doing is saying, look, this narrow way of compensating people with distributions of goods is so callously narrow that it doesn't actually allow people to flourish as human beings with all the functions that they have.
Exactly. It's more about society's perspective about different peoples here. Is what we're actually like aiming to achieve, rather than some monetary compensation for what we deem to be unlucky.
And I actually think it's based on the same concerns that luck egalitarians have, but she goes about writing those in a completely different way.
I think that's where I would disagree. I don't think it is the same concern, because luck egalitarians by definition are concerned with the luck and the distribution of goods.
Well, no,
where she says that that's
but the distribution of goods is the way that they solve the problem. She wants to solve, I think, talking theoretically.
Well, I think theoretically they actually view that as the problem. They say I can identify brute and optional luck, and there is a distribution of goods that is unequal, and the goal is to correct that unequal distribution.
It's not logically entailed, though. Like noticing that there are differences in brute and option luck does not logically entail solving them with a distribution of goods. That is a way to solve that issue. She should frame her alternative as a better way to solve that issue. And entailed in that, in solving the issue of brute luck in that way, the manner in which you solve it is actually what brings on board the respecting people as equals and not oppressing people and preventing oppression.
I think I agree more with Giffin, though, because Giffin's saying this. He's saying like, okay, we don't even think that she would view it through that lens, though, because you're saying, I think you're still caught up in saying like, okay, if someone's born with the club foot, it's kind of unfortunate they're born
pretty unlucky. Yeah.
But she's not even looking at it through that perspective. She's saying, in fact, the issue those people face
is not with the club foot.
It's the oppression and the fact that others don't view them as equal. That is the issue when they encounter other people in society. They don't, in fact, view that person as an equal citizen.
But I'm sorry, because I think what she was saying is like more concretely, it's that society is not set up in a way that they can act as equals, right?
In some areas, because it depends on
social,
because exactly,
which involves the institutions, of course, but is not just the institutions.
But what I'm saying
like
is
a perspective. And then there's also like the government institutions and what they need to do to ensure that all citizens are, of equal standing.
Yeah. I really think she sets it up in the wrong way then. I think she should set it up as, I guess I hugely disagree with setting it up that way then. So
I think that one of the problems is we're reading this in 2022, where this paper was written in 99, specifically addressing the most popular view at the time.
I don't think that's an issue.
It explains why she talks so long about luck egalitarianism, and that's the point of contrite instead of just stating her positive claim.
Giffin, we got to remember this is like a work of philosophy, though. So she should be getting at, okay, what are like the core motivations and what do they logically entail? Not how have these been contemporarily like done, because that's more like political theory, like what tends to correlate with what. Like what she should say, I think this is more theoretically parsimonious. She should say, look, luck egalitarians have identified a problem in brute luck, right? Now let's table option luck for now because that's more complicated.
Yeah.
She should say, the luck egalitarians have rightly pointed out a massive flaw in our society with brute luck, in that if you are born in what we call unlucky ways, you have a worse life. Now, that's a problem. The way that luck egalitarians have contemporarily gone about solving that is a distribution of goods. I don't think, I'm speaking as her, that logically follows. A given solution does not logically follow from that problem. The problem's right. The way that they try to solve it is wrong. I want to propose a new solution to the problem of brute luck as luck egalitarians have laid it out. And I want to call that democratic equality, where to truly solve the issues of bad fortune or bad luck, right? That entails not being compensated precisely because you don't actually get to flourish in all of the ways you would if society, because that's the only thing, we can't legislate people's attitudes. So what can we legislate? We can legislate what the material accessibility of people, of people born of all types is, right? So that's the way that that's a concrete way in which we can actually solve these issues. What am I making any sense or not? What is the smile for?
No, you are, but I still think, I don't know, given
so this is what I identified, Jordan. Whenever you were laying out from Anderson's perspective, you said like, I agree with the problem, disagree with the way to go about it. But I think she doesn't disagree. She actually does disagree with the problem. She does not think that the brute luck is the problem.
But okay.
Yeah,
I understand what you're
saying. There you go. Thank you.
Wait. Okay.
It's
I think that. Wait, no. I think that it's actually deeply entailed in the way she goes about solving it.
Okay, explain, because we might be here.
Okay.
The golden land.
She's saying that it's actually not. Repeat you were saying. Repeat what you just said.
Okay, I'll just repeat the whole thing. You were speaking for Anderson and saying like she should say. Oh,
no. Skip to the end. It's not actually a problem of luck.
Yeah.
Okay.
Luck egalitarians identify it as a problem of luck. Anderson does not at all. So the problem is not the same.
Okay. I totally disagree. I think
with Anderson or our characterization of Anderson?
Neither. I think I'm saying theoretically entailed in trying to solve that. She actually is implicitly saying that luck is an issue, because she's saying that
she might actually, I think she is saying luck is an issue. I don't think she's saying it's the problem.
I still agree with Giffin. That's exactly the point.
Like brute luck, I think she would agree that in all the cases relevant, brute luck probably plays a role, but we should not be targeting brute luck.
Wait. Here's okay. In the world in which everyone's accessibility is the same, is it still better or worse to be born with a clubbed foot?
Well, that's the thing is Anderson's framework, she would probably argue, doesn't need to answer that question because they have the equal things. But lucky egalitarianism, by definition.
No. I don't care about luck egalitarianism for a minute. On her view, is it? Can you?
Once you've established,
I think it's preposterous because look,
it's not that she's saying they are like it's not worse. She's saying it's not relevant to equality. Once you have given like
It's not relevant to political equality, but again, that's not disavowing.
No, there are going to be differences between people, and there's people are going to be born into good and bad luck. So you're still going to have, under either system, you're still going to have people that are born into like a billionaire family that's like, that is like the handsomest, smartest devil in the world.
the Musk family,
the Jordan B. Petersons of the world.
And so you're going to have like, obviously, people are going to be born with like, good and bad luck.
Yeah.
But the idea is like, there's no like absolute bad luck and no absolute good luck.
I disagree with that.
Are you? Yeah. But here's the thing.
Even in her world,
but here's the thing. Like, I actually really enjoyed that one thought experiment, which she kind of tore apart, where she talked about, or I forget exactly whose view this is. Might have been Dworkin's. I don't know, but it was the one where you compare person A to person B, and you compare all their attributes, and someone could be almost viewed as like profoundly unlucky if they're just beat out.
Oh yeah.
I can promise all three of us right here that there are people in the world who beat us out in almost every single attribute. Yes. Like if you go to like Harvard Medical School's website right now, go through maybe like their graduating class, you'll find just like an absolute...
There will be someone who is more athletic, who's smarter, who has better relationships, who's happier, like everyone.
Simultaneously.
Yes.
Like, all the way down.
Are you profoundly unlucky for not being that guy?
Yes.
Are you? I mean, you're so much better than a lot of other people, are you not? Are you profoundly unlucky for not being that guy?
You can separate that claim from the political and societal mechanism by which because we can't remedy that deep of luck, right?
No, we
egalitarianism
we can't remedy it
within their realm.
I couldn't hear either of you.
Wait, repeat that. Is that's what I was going to say?
In the case of that, like superhuman, the Oberman,
the Uber
from Harvard Medical, from the Harvard Medical School. As long as like the framework of equality has been reached, Anderson is done with respect to equality, but luck egalitarians would still have to step in and say there is an unequal distribution of goods, and it is within our realm to correct this. Right?
No, I think that's
still
a
be
straw
concerned
man.
with the dullards.
I think that is still okay. It's absolutely still like a concern that they could have, but it's not like they wouldn't. There's not like a pluralistic sense of a luck egalitarian, right? Where like anything short. If she's saying. Like, right, it's a straw man of luck egalitarianism to say that it has to be like a Harrison Bergeron world, right? Like, do you guys know that short story? Like Kurt Vonnegut? Oh, like equality of out the exact equality of outcome is a bad world, obviously, right? Where everyone is equal in exactly the same ways. That's like the Harrison Bergeron story. But that's I think that's like a straw man. Like to say that luck egalitarians, like, is she saying that they like their worldview kind of degenerates into that, or it's like logically entailed? Because I don't think that follows.
Well, certainly that guy's view did.
Whose?
Whoever put forward that model. I don't know. Should be compensated. Really? Because
can't you say wait? Isn't it logically congruent to say it's true that I'm in a deep sense unlucky not to be better in every way that I am, but it's also true to say that it's not necessarily that we want to enact a political system that negates all of those. Why is that?
I think that's Anderson's model.
So do we find the perfect person in this country, and then anybody who's not them, we're going to compensate to some degree, depending on how far away they are? It's like, okay,
that's not what I was saying, though.
But under this model, you said, okay, under that model that was put forward that she critiques, it's like, okay, someone might say, okay, do you want to be Jordan or that guy? That guy. Okay, what if you get $1 million in your Jordan? Someone's like, okay, I might take that. I think I'd take that. Done. Yeah. But it's like, do you want to be that guy or the guy with no legs with like one eye? You know what I mean? Who's like also has like mental deficiencies. It's like, it might take $1 trillion. You know what I mean? Like it might take $1 trillion to like, to live that life. So
And it's the project of luck egalitarianism to make that happen.
I don't think that that's logically entailed. I just think that she picks the worst luck egalitarians. Like,
so in the view of luck egalitarianism,
her view, of course, is totally reasonable, but that's because she contrasts it to like Radagowski's or Raskolnikov's, like Rasputin's worldview. Like, this is. I'm fucking brain dead at this point. I need to think about this more, but like, I honestly think that her view makes theoretical. It makes more. It's more theoretically parsimonious if you actually view it in a completely different way than she does. Here's my current position, and I'll actually like listen to this when I'm editing this episode because it's going to need a hell of a lot of editing. But I'm curious, like, here's my current view, and I'll actually update you guys, months from now in the future, whatever, whenever I'm like done with all this. I think that her conclusion is right in like 95% of the ways that she does it, but I think that her argumentation for it is sloppy. And her conclusions don't actually follow because of the way she argues for it. I think that the way I laid it out is more parsimonious. I don't know. That's currently where I am.
So we don't dive back in. It's almost midnight.
Yeah.
But
we should make our final thoughts. That's my final.
I was going to say that's probably
my final thought. And again, like I don't know this literature, so I'm open to changing my mind about that.
Yeah, I think I ultimately agree with her. In the sense that I don't believe that we should view immutable characteristics in people as either pitiable conditions or, things to be or reasons to compensate individuals, and rather there needs to be, or we should aim for a societal perspective shift in which we view others as equals, we respect differences, and the government plays a role as insofar as to ensure equal citizenry, and it shouldn't go any further than that. I think that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess my final thoughts are this paper provided a lot of great vocabulary, both that like she creates and also critiques from previous literature. That's just super interesting and useful. I definitely agree with her critique of luck egalitarianism insofar as the goal of egalitarianism, should be what she lays out as like the end of like the positive and negative things she lays out, depending on how she defines certain specific aspects. And her democratic equality, while it needs a lot of explanations, especially for certain terms, seems to be a worthy goal and addresses many of the problems of luck egalitarianism as she laid out.
Okay, nice. I look forward to editing this, even though it's going to be an absolute bear.
That must be awful, honestly.
Giffin,
you will need to compensate you for this.
I will. It's bad brute luck that I have to edit this.
Does Anderson care though?
Rakowski certainly doesn't.
The answer is no.
Yeah, he does care. Rakowski cares.
Well, that's true. Actually, Rakowski cares.
Actually, no. Wait, no. This is
it's option luck.
Yeah, he wouldn't care.
If any possible thing could have converted it to option luck, it is just outside the ball game.
I was laughing earlier because of this. I looked up. Hang on, it's in my way here. This is Rakowski here. Oh wait, hang on.
You're way zoomed in for me.
He looks exactly like what his views are.
Leave them, boys.
Leave them to die.
He could have had insurance.
You know what?
He doesn't comment on the barriers to getting the insurance. Like, it was an option.
You know what's actually a fatal flaw with obviously Rakowski's already flawed view too? You can spin anything as option luck. You can spin it's so easy to just reduce anything to option luck.
Yeah, from that conversation, I thought it was very interesting, especially from like an economics perspective, that you could, with a new vocabulary, convert brute luck to option luck. That is actually very interesting, and has consequences for like policy.
Yeah,
but Rakowski's a monster.
We're going to provide for this. Oh, go ahead, Giffin.
He's like, if it's conceivable that there was an option presented to you with no regard to like what the barriers to that option were, you simply have lost your privilege for
It's
any
like-
kind of compensation.
Because his view is like unfalsifiable. It's like you could have overcome almost anything.
Is it conceivable? Is it like even if it is only one in a quadrillion, like every single atom in the universe had to align, was it an available option? Like,
Yeah.
Sorry.
I just thought that I don't remember the actual name of this fallacy, but it's something, it's like, contrasting a reasonable alternative with extremely unreasonable ones is, yeah, it makes her proposal is extremely reasonable. I just don't think that I think my entire issue with this episode was like, I didn't think that her grounding for her claim was logically entailing its conclusion, even though it was reasonable. Right? Like that, I guess that was my whole issue with it.
I'm just too brain dead to even consider.
Oh,
at this point.
I'm really brain dead at this point. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of Plato's Cave. I always enjoy discussing topics with these two guys. So if you want to support the show in any way, you can do so simply by sharing it. I'm hoping to get this show out to more people. And so if you want to share it on Twitter or social media, that would really help me. You can also rate it on Apple Podcasts. Like this video if you're watching on YouTube, or subscribe via Apple Podcasts or an RSS feed. You can also discuss it on your own show and link back to my website, or you can connect me with recommended guests or topics to cover. You can get in contact with me at platoscavepodcast@gmail.com. Follow me on Twitter at Jordan_C_Myers. And I now have a website for my philosophy endeavors at jordanmyers.org. If you want to know a little bit more about me and my fellow co-hosts, as I said in the introduction, I'm a master's student in philosophy at the University of Houston. I did my undergrad at the University of Pittsburgh, where I studied mechanical engineering and philosophy. And now that I'm back at school, I'm hoping to more closely study moral responsibility, free will, ethics, epistemology, and moral psychology. Those are topics that I was introduced to and got really interested in my undergrad work. So Adam and Giffin accompanied me on this show, and Adam is one of my oldest friends. We actually met in kindergarten, and we've been interested in philosophical topics for as long as we can remember, and in a lot of ways it's been the basis of our friendship. Adam studied chemistry and biology at Cornell, and he is currently working at a law firm. And he's especially interested in moral responsibility as well, but also law, religion, and free will. Giffin is also one of my oldest friends, and we've been friends since elementary school as well. Giffin studied biology and economics at RPI, and now he works in human health research. He believes that there's very interesting overlap between both of his fields of study and philosophy, and he's particularly interested in exploring political philosophy. So this series was right up his alley. And with all of that information, again, I hope that you enjoyed this episode, and I hope that you get in contact with me or follow my work in any way that you deem reasonable to do. So with that, thank you for listening.